rain had been coming down in sheets for 3 hours straight, hammering the dense canopy of the Oregon wilderness like a war drum. I was already soaked to the bone, despite the high-tech gear the government had issued me. My boots squelched in the mud as I pressed deeper into the forest, the rifle in my hands feeling heavier with each step. The mission brief had been vague. Too vague for my liking. Search and neutralize, they said. No mention of what I was hunting. No intel. Just coordinates, a vague warning to expect the unexpected, and a promise that my silence would be rewarded. I wasn't just a Navy SEAL. I was one of the best. Reconnaissance, extraction, and high-risk ops were my bread and butter. But this was something different. They'd flown me in solo, no team, no backup, and the hairs on the back of my neck hadn't stopped prickling since I touched down. The forest itself felt wrong. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but there was something off about the place. The air was thick with the smell of wet earth and decaying vegetation, but there was an unnatural stillness too. No birdsong, no rustling of small animals. Just the relentless drum of the rain and the faint hum of my own breathing. It was the kind of silence that makes your skin crawl, like the world is holding its breath. I paused at the base of a towering Douglas fir, scanning the area with my night vision goggles. The green-tinted world around me revealed nothing but endless trees and undergrowth. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. My finger hovered over the trigger as my eyes darted from shadow to shadow. "This is Bravo 37, I murmured into my comms. My voice sounded too loud, even though I was whispering. No visual. Advancing on target coordinates. Over. Static. Then a faint crackle. "Copy that, Bravo 37. Proceed with caution. You're close." Close to what? They hadn't told me. All I knew was that a series of disappearances had been reported in this region. Hikers, hunters, even a couple of forest rangers. The locals were spooked, whispering about strange lights in the sky and unnatural sounds in the night. Typical backwoods hysteria, I'd thought at first. But now, standing here in the suffocating darkness, I wasn't so sure. It happened just as I was about to move again. A sound, low and far too close. I froze, every muscle in my body tensing as I strained to pinpoint its source. It wasn't a growl exactly. More like a cross between a hiss and the rumble of an approaching storm. Whatever it wasn't human. I swung my rifle in the direction of the noise, my pulse hammering in my ears. The rain muffled everything, making it impossible to judge distance or direction. "Identify yourself," I barked, knowing full well that no answer would come. The sound came again, louder this time, and accompanied by a rustling in the underbrush. My finger tightened on the trigger as my instincts screamed at me to run, to get the hell out of there. But Navy SEALs don't run. Not from the living, and certainly not from whatever this was. I took a cautious step forward, my boots sinking into the mud. The underbrush parted, and for a split second, I thought I saw something. A flash of movement, a glint of something wet and black. And then it was gone, swallowed by the shadows. My comms crackled again, but this time, the voice on the other end was different. Metallic, distorted, and barely intelligible. "Turn, back, not, safe. Repeat command," I said, my voice steady despite the chill that ran down my spine. I didn't copy. Silence. I exhaled slowly, forcing myself to focus. Whatever was out here, it wasn't going to scare me off. Not yet. Not until I had answers. The rain let up briefly, but the fog rolled in, thick and clinging, turning the forest into a maze of distorted shapes and shifting shadows. I moved forward, my rifle up and ready, every step calculated and deliberate. Whatever was out there, it was smart. Smarter than any animal I'd ever encountered, and it was watching me. About 20 minutes after the last strange noise, I reached the coordinates. The site wasn't what I expected. I'd been anticipating some kind of camp, maybe signs of a struggle or the remains of one of the missing hikers. Instead, I found a clearing. Circular, unnaturally perfect, with the ground scoured clean of vegetation. Even the mud seemed wrong, unnaturally smooth, with an odd sheen that reflected the faint moonlight breaking through the clouds. I knelt down, brushing my gloved fingers over the ground. It wasn't just smooth. It was warm, despite the biting chill of the air. A faint hum vibrated through the soles of my boots, almost imperceptible but definitely there. This wasn't natural. "Command, this is Bravo 37, I said, breaking the uneasy silence. "I've reached the target location. No visual on hostiles or civilians. Area is abnormal. Requesting further instructions. Over." Static hissed in my earpiece, followed by a long pause. Then a voice. Faint, disjointed, and almost drowned out by the static. "Hold. Position. Extraction. Inbound." Extraction. That wasn't part of the plan. I frowned, scanning the perimeter of the clearing. "Command, clarify. Is this mission scrubbed? Over." The only response was more static. Something shifted in the fog. A tall silhouette, standing motionless just beyond the edge of the clearing. My heart kicked into overdrive as I swung my rifle toward it, the night vision painting the figure in shades of green. It wasn't human. Too tall, too thin, with limbs that bent at unnatural angles. "Identify yourself," I barked, my voice cutting through the stillness like a gunshot. The thing moved. Not toward me, but sideways, circling the edge of the clearing with an unnerving fluidity. It didn't make a sound, not even when its spindly limbs brushed against the undergrowth. I tracked it with my rifle, my finger hovering over the trigger. "Command, I have visual on an unidentified entity. Advise. Over." Silence again. The creature stopped abruptly, as if it knew I was waiting for it to make a move. Then, without warning, it dropped to all fours and lunged. I fired instinctively, the sharp crack of the rifle splitting the night. The rounds hit their mark. Center mass. But the thing barely flinched. It skidded to a stop just shy of the clearing's center, its body writhing in ways that made my stomach churn. I could see it more clearly now. Its skin was slick and black, almost leathery, with a texture that reminded me of the strange mud beneath my boots. Its eyes, or what I assumed were eyes, were small and deep-set, glowing faintly like embers. The thing let out a sound that wasn't quite a scream, more like the high-pitched wail of metal grinding against metal. Then it charged again. I fired 3 more rounds, aiming for the head this time. One hit, snapping the creature's head back with enough force to topple it. It hit the ground hard, convulsing before finally going still. I didn't lower my rifle. Instead, I stepped closer, my boots squelching in the mud as I kept the weapon trained on its unmoving form. Up close, the thing looked even more unnatural. Its joints were wrong, bending in ways that made no sense, and its torso seemed to ripple as if something was moving beneath the surface. "Command, hostile neutralized," I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through me. "Request immediate extraction. Over." This time, there was no static, just silence. A sudden gust of wind swept through the clearing, carrying with it a sound that made my blood run cold. It was the same hiss I'd heard earlier, but now it was everywhere. Coming from the trees, the fog, the very ground beneath me. I turned, scanning the forest, and saw them. Dozens of them, their silhouettes shifting in the mist, their glowing eyes fixed on me. I wasn't hunting a predator. I'd stumbled into a hive. My training kicked in before fear could take hold. I sprinted back toward the tree line, moving fast but staying low, rifle at the ready. The hive. They were everywhere, their glowing eyes cutting through the fog like pinpricks of fire. Each one of them moved in unnatural synchronization, bodies slinking and twisting as though gravity barely applied to them. The forest felt alive, and not in the way it should have. Shadows danced in the corners of my vision, and that metallic wail echoed in bursts, each one louder than the last. They weren't chasing me outright. No, they were herding me, corralling me toward something deeper in the woods. I wasn't about to play along. Breaking left, I ducked behind a massive cedar, catching my breath as I scanned my surroundings. My night vision goggles distorted the fog into an amorphous blur, but the faint glow of their eyes gave them away. 4 of them now, closing in on my position. I switched to thermal, hoping for an edge. What I saw made my stomach drop. They weren't warm-blooded, at least not in the way mammals are. Their bodies registered in faint patches of heat, like the embers of a dying fire. Whatever these things were, they weren't natural. A low hiss came from my left. Too close. I swung my rifle around, firing on instinct. The muzzle flash lit up the fog, and the creature screeched, collapsing into the underbrush. Its body convulsed violently, black ichor pooling beneath it. But the others didn't flinch. They pressed forward, moving in that same fluid, unnerving way. I didn't have enough ammo for this. Command, this is Bravo 3-7. Multiple hostiles closing in, requesting immediate extraction. Repeat, immediate extraction. Nothing. Just the hum of static. I needed a defensible position, somewhere I could hold out until help arrived. If help was even coming. Pushing through the undergrowth, I scanned for higher ground. A rocky outcrop jutted out above the treetops 100 yards ahead, barely visible through the mist. It wasn't perfect, but it was better than being boxed in down here. The first explosion took me completely by surprise. A brilliant flash lit up the forest, followed by a deafening crack. I hit the ground hard, covering my head as chunks of earth and debris rained down around me. When I looked up, the clearing I'd left behind was a smoldering crater. A new sound filled the air. Rotor blades. I scrambled to my feet, my heart pounding as a sleek black helicopter descended through the fog. It wasn't military. Not ours, anyway. The craft was too angular, too advanced, with no visible markings. Before I could react, the side door slid open, revealing a man in tactical gear. His face was obscured by a helmet and visor, but the rifle slung across his chest wasn't standard issue. Bravo 3-7, he shouted over the roar of the rotors. Get in, now. I hesitated. This wasn't my extraction team. Hell, I didn't even know if these were friendlies. Move it, soldier, he barked. You want to live, you get on this bird. A roar erupted behind me, closer than I'd realized. I didn't have time to think. Sprinting toward the helicopter, I leaped onto the skids and pulled myself inside, just as the creatures broke through the tree line. The man slammed the door shut, and the helicopter surged upward, engines whining as it fought against the dense fog. Through the window, I could see the creatures swarming the clearing below. They didn't try to climb. They just stood there, watching, their glowing eyes following us as we rose into the sky. What the hell are those things? I demanded, slumping into a seat as I tried to catch my breath. The man removed his helmet, revealing a scarred face and eyes that had seen too much. Classified, he said flatly, handing me a water bottle. You'll be briefed when we're safe. Safe. The word felt hollow. What's your unit? I pressed. Who sent you? He didn't answer, instead gesturing toward the cockpit. Pilot, take us to Facility Echo 12. Full lockdown. Facility Echo 12. I'd never heard of it. Look, I said, leaning forward. I don't know who you are or what's going on, but I need answers. Now. He met my gaze, his expression unreadable. You just walked into a war, Bravo 3-7. And those things down there. He glanced out the window, his jaw tightening. They're only the beginning. The helicopter flew in silence, save for the low hum of the rotors slicing through the misty air. I stared out the window, trying to make sense of what had just happened. The forest below disappeared into a sea of gray fog, but I could still feel the creature's eyes on me, watching, waiting, the man across from me. Let's call him Scarface. Hadn't said a word since his cryptic warning. He was leaning back in his seat, rifle resting across his knees, with the calm demeanor of someone who'd seen this all before. I wasn't so calm. My mind raced with questions, but I started with the most pressing. What's Facility Echo 12? I asked, breaking the silence. Scarface looked at me, his eyes cold and unreadable. A place where people like you go when they see things they're not supposed to see. People like me, I shot back. I was sent here on a mission. Your mission, from the looks of it. So how about you drop the cryptic act and tell me what the hell's going on? He smirked, but there was no humor in it. You really think they told you the truth? The people who sent you out here don't care if you live or die. They only care if the job gets done. And judging by the fact that you're still breathing, I'd say you have no idea what you were up against. I killed one of those things, I said, my voice tight. It went down. So don't sit there and tell me I don't know what I'm doing. Scarface leaned forward, his expression hardening. You killed one, sure. But how many more were out there? 10, 20, 100? And do you even know what they are, what they want, or why they're here? The questions hit harder than I expected. I didn't have answers, and he knew it. What are they? I asked, my voice quieter now. He hesitated, as if debating whether to tell me. We call them nightshades, he said finally. They're not from here. Not from this planet, not from this reality, for all we know. They don't think like us, don't hunt like us, and they're not alone. The weight of his words settled over me like a lead blanket. You're saying this is, what, an invasion? Not yet, he said. But it's coming. The disappearances, the strange lights, the stories the locals tell, those are just the first signs. They're testing us, studying us, and when they're ready, he trailed off, his eyes darkening. I leaned back, trying to process what he was saying. If you know all this, why hasn't anyone done something? Why hasn't the government stepped in? Scarface laughed, but it was a bitter, hollow sound. You think they haven't? You think this is the first time? Echo 12 exists because this has happened before. Different places, different creatures, but always the same pattern. And every time, we clean up the mess and bury the truth. The helicopter jolted suddenly, the cabin shaking as the pilot adjusted course. Turbulence, the pilot said over his shoulder, but his voice was tense. Scarface stood, gripping the overhead rail for balance. We're almost there. Stay sharp. I glanced out the window again, and my stomach dropped. Below us, the forest had given way to a barren expanse of rocky terrain, illuminated by floodlights mounted on towering fences. At the center of it all was a structure. A massive, reinforced facility that looked more like a fortress than a research lab. The helicopter descended, and the air grew heavier with each passing second. As we touched down on the helipad, a team of armed guards approached, their weapons trained on the surrounding darkness. These weren't regular soldiers. Their gear was too advanced, their movements too precise. Scarface stepped out first, motioning for me to follow. Welcome to Echo 12, he said. Let's hope you survive long enough to leave. The guards closed in around us, escorting us toward the facility. The air was cold and sharp, carrying a faint metallic tang that made my skin crawl. The doors to the facility hissed open, revealing a sterile, dimly lit corridor lined with reinforced glass panels. Behind the glass, I caught glimpses of things I couldn't comprehend. Biological samples, containment units, and in one case, a massive claw embedded in a slab of concrete. What is this place? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Scarface didn't answer. Instead, he led me to a secure room at the end of the corridor. Inside, a group of people in lab coats and tactical gear were gathered around a holographic display. They looked up as we entered, their expressions a mix of curiosity and unease. This is the seal, one of them asked, a woman with sharp features and a clipped tone. Scarface nodded. He encountered the nightshades, took one down, survived the hive. He's seen enough to be a liability. The woman's gaze shifted to me. Then he's also seen enough to be an asset. What's that supposed to mean? I asked, my patience wearing thin. It means, she said, stepping closer, that you're part of this now, whether you like it or not. The room fell into a tense silence. The woman, who introduced herself as Dr. Keller, motioned for me to sit. I stayed on my feet, jaw clenched, scanning the faces around me. Scarface leaned against the wall, arms crossed, watching me like I was some new specimen they'd just brought in. What do you want from me? I demanded, my voice cutting through the thick tension. Dr. Keller clasped her hands behind her back, her tone clinical. You've encountered the nightshades firsthand. That alone makes you valuable. You survived, which means you're resourceful, and you killed one. 2, I interrupted. I killed 2 of those things. She raised an eyebrow. Impressive. But that also means you've been exposed to them, possibly in ways we don't fully understand yet. Exposed, I repeated, my stomach tightening. What are you talking about? She gestured toward the holographic display, which flickered to life, projecting an image of the creature I'd shot in the clearing. Its elongated limbs and glowing eyes were even more unsettling in high definition. The nightshades emit a type of pheromone, a biological marker we believe is used for communication. Prolonged exposure to it has unpredictable effects. Unpredictable how? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted the answer. Her gaze didn't waver. Physical changes, heightened aggression, hallucinations. In extreme cases, complete psychological breakdown. I stared at her, my pulse hammering in my ears. You're telling me I've been contaminated? It's a possibility, she said, her tone calm but unyielding. Which is why you're here. We'll run tests, monitor you, ensure there are no lasting effects. And if there are? She didn't answer, but the look in her eyes said enough. Scarface pushed off the wall, stepping into the conversation. Look, Doc, the guy's not here to be a lab rat. He's a soldier. He can help us. Dr. Keller hesitated, clearly not a fan of being challenged, but she eventually nodded. Fine. For now, we'll proceed under observation. But if there are any signs of... There won't be, I cut in. I'm fine. And if you're really dealing with an invasion, you're going to need someone who knows how to fight. A murmur ran through the room. The tactical team exchanged glances, and even Scarface looked at me with something close to respect. You sure about that? Scarface asked. This isn't a war you've been trained for. War's war, I said. Doesn't matter who, or what, you're fighting. Dr. Keller sighed, motioning toward a side door. Then let's see what you're really capable of. The door led to what could only be described as an underground armory. Rows of advanced weaponry lined the walls, and a holographic map of the surrounding area dominated the center of the room. The map was dotted with red markers, each one labeled with coordinates and timestamps. These are the hot spots, Keller explained. Locations where nightshade activity has been reported in the last 72 hours. We've been tracking them, but the patterns are inconsistent. Inconsistent how? I asked, stepping closer to the map. They don't stay in one place for long, Scarface said, pointing to a cluster of markers. They hit an area, leave a mess, then vanish. We think they're using some kind of network. Tunnels, maybe, but we haven't been able to confirm it. And you want me to find out? Not alone, Keller said. You'll be part of a team. Scarface will lead, and you'll provide tactical support. Your first-hand experience with the Nightshades makes you uniquely qualified for this mission. Scarface smirked. Looks like you just got drafted. I glanced at him, then back at the map. This wasn't how I'd imagined my mission going, but if there was a chance to get some answers, and maybe even level the playing field, I wasn't about to back down. When do we start? I asked. Keller exchanged a look with Scarface, then nodded. Immediately. The team was assembled within minutes. 4 of us, including Scarface and myself, suited up with cutting-edge gear I'd never seen before. Our objective was clear. Locate the suspected tunnel network, neutralize any hostiles, and recover intel. As we loaded into an armored transport, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were walking into something far bigger than we were prepared for. The Nightshades weren't just predators. They were organized, intelligent, and adaptive. And if Keller was right, they were just the beginning. The transport rumbled to life, carrying us deeper into the unknown. The transport jostled violently as we barreled down an unmarked dirt road, cutting deeper into the wilderness. Outside, the night pressed in like a suffocating blanket, the moonlight doing little to penetrate the oppressive darkness. I sat across from Scarface, who was methodically loading magazines with an unsettling calm. The 2 other team members, Mason and Torres, were quiet, their faces hard and unreadable. You ever wonder why they keep sending us out here? Torres muttered, breaking the silence. Because we're the best they've got, Scarface replied without looking up. Or because we're expendable, Mason said, his voice tinged with bitterness. I couldn't argue with that. I'd been sent on plenty of missions where the higher-ups didn't seem to care whether I made it back, as long as the objective was completed. This felt no different, except for the stakes. This time, it wasn't just about survival. It was about understanding what we were up against. We're closing in, the driver called back. 5 mics. Scarface stood, gripping the rail above his head. All right, listen up. Our target is a suspected entrance to the tunnel network. We drop, secure the perimeter, and push inside. Stay sharp and watch each other's backs. These things don't play fair. I checked my gear one last time, feeling the weight of the mission settle over me. My rifle, freshly loaded, felt heavier than usual. The experimental scanner Keller had given me was strapped to my wrist, its interface blinking faintly. It was supposed to pick up traces of the nightshade's pheromones, but I wasn't entirely sure I trusted it. The transport screeched to a halt, and the back doors slammed open. We spilled out into a clearing surrounded by towering pines, their branches clawing at the night sky. The air was colder here, and that same metallic tang I'd noticed earlier lingered, faint but unmistakable. This is it, Scarface said, pointing to a rocky outcrop at the edge of the clearing. A narrow fissure split the rock face, just wide enough for a man to squeeze through. Tunnel entrance is up ahead. Move out. We fanned out, advancing cautiously toward the outcrop. My scanner beeped softly, the display lighting up with faint traces of activity. My pulse quickened as I remembered Keller's words. Prolonged exposure to the pheromones has unpredictable effects. Was that what I was feeling now? The tightness in my chest, the creeping sense of being watched. Contact, Mason hissed, raising his rifle. I followed his gaze and froze. A figure stood at the edge of the clearing, partially obscured by the shadows. Its elongated limbs and glowing eyes were unmistakable. The nightshade didn't move, but its head tilted slightly, as if studying us. Hold fire, Scarface ordered, his voice low but firm. It's baiting us. Before I could process what he meant, the ground beneath us erupted. A blur of movement shot out from the fissure, and suddenly we were surrounded. 5 nightshades emerged from the shadows, their movements unnervingly fluid. Engage, Scarface shouted. The clearing exploded into chaos. Gunfire lit up the night, the sharp crack of rifles punctuated by the nightshades and human screeches. I focused on one, aiming for its center mass, but it moved too quickly, darting left and right in a way that defied logic. Flank left, Torres yelled, firing off a burst that clipped one of the creatures. It stumbled, but only for a moment before lunging at him. I swung my rifle around, firing a short burst that connected with the creature's head. It dropped instantly, its body crumpling like a marionette with its strings cut. On your 6, Mason shouted, and I barely had time to turn before another nightshade was on me. Its clawed hand swiped at my chest, tearing through my vest and sending me sprawling. The scanner on my wrist went wild, flashing red and emitting a high-pitched whine. I scrambled to my feet, my heart pounding as the creature loomed over me. Its eyes glowed brighter, almost hypnotic, and for a moment I felt rooted to the spot. Get down, Scarface roared, barreling into the creature and knocking it off balance. He fired point blank into its torso, the bullets shredding through its flesh. Move, into the tunnel, he shouted, dragging me to my feet. We regrouped at the fissure, Torres and Mason laying down suppressive fire as we retreated. One by one, we squeezed through the narrow gap, the screeches of the nightshades echoing behind us. Inside, the tunnel was pitch black, the air damp and suffocating. Our flashlights cut through the darkness, revealing jagged walls and a floor slick with something I didn't want to identify. They won't follow us in here, Scarface said, his voice tight. Why not? I asked, still catching my breath. Because this isn't their hunting ground, he said. It's their home. The weight of his words hit me like a punch to the gut. We weren't just in enemy territory. We were in their nest. We pushed forward, Scarface said, his voice steely. Find the network, plant the charges, and get the hell out. I nodded, gripping my rifle tighter. There was no turning back now. As we moved deeper into the tunnel, the walls began to change. They were smoother, almost polished, and strange symbols were etched into the stone. The air grew colder, and the metallic tang intensified, making it hard to breathe. What the hell is this? Torres whispered, his flashlight sweeping over the carvings. Not man-made, Scarface said grimly. That's for damn sure. The tunnel opened into a massive cavern, and what we saw stopped us in our tracks. A structure stood at the center, something between a shrine and a machine, glowing faintly with an otherworldly light. Around it, dozens of nightshades moved in eerie synchronization, their attention fixed on the structure. "This is it," Scarface said, his voice barely audible. "The heart of the network." I swallowed hard, my grip tightening on my rifle. Whatever was happening here, it wasn't just survival anymore. It was war. I'm from remote Alaska. I grew up with stories of old creatures and legends, but I've also seen some things. I'm typing this on my phone, so I apologize if I misspell anything, but here's what I have to say. My village is roughly 250 miles northwest of Fairbanks, Alaska. It is situated in the mountains and surrounded by a national park, so there is already suspicion of supernatural entities there. Growing up, I was always told about the Inuligarak and Nu Thli Garak Senrat on my Yupik side, or the little people. These smaller humanoids are of smaller proportions, but they are strong, fast, very smart, and they even speak an old dialect of the language of the area they live in. At a distant point in time, we lived alongside them and hunted for and with them out on the Nuna, or tundra. But as one family was visiting another, a human's dog ate the little one's child, and so began a grudge that some still hold today towards humans. There are stories of people being lured away from their homes just to be tricked and left out in the middle of nowhere. There are also stories of them helping us humans in times of need. For example, in my village, caribou were herded by a small, blurry thing towards a group of people according to a story from the 60s, 70s, resulting in a good harvest of animals that fall. There are also stories of the Inukpak big person, sometimes called Bigfoot by people, even though they don't always look like an ape-like human. The old stories talk of giants that roamed the land in silence or in anger. One story even tells of a cannibalistic one out west near Nome or Kotzebue. Back home, they come around when the caribou do, like the Inuligarat, and will either cause mischief or just watch humans. In my personal experiences, I've seen the little ones and the big ones. They both can resemble humans or just a blur on the land. I believe they're part of another world or dimension, and that's why they cannot always be seen, but hey, we may never know. My roommate and I were driving to Estacada for pie and coffee. I saw a reflection of what appeared to be eyes alongside the road between the road and river. Then, as we came closer driving, I saw what appeared to be a human-like head, shoulders, and forearms behind a tree, above a horizontal tree limb. It startled me because I had never seen anything like that before. We drove for another mile or so, and neither of us said a word. Finally, I said, "Kevin, did you see something back there?" He said yes. I asked him what he saw and described to me what I just wrote. The next day, we went back to the site to see if maybe we could figure anything out. That limb was about 7 feet above the ground. It was dry, and we didn't see any tracks. Across the highway, there was a swamp with a cliff behind it and timber and farms beyond that. There was a game trail diagonally from the highway to the river, which is about 75 feet away. That's all. Description of creature. It must have been around 10 feet tall, judging by the limb we saw it behind. Dark brown in color, short neck, wide body compared to me 6 feet 4 in. 240 pounds. Late one fall evening in 1978, around 2 a.m., our horses suddenly became very agitated and noisy. Figuring a bear may be prowling about, my son and I grabbed flashlights and our 30-30 and hurried off to investigate. By now, the horses were very upset and in danger of hurting themselves in an effort to get away from the bear. I was fearful that the bear may have entered the corral. When we arrived at the corral, whatever animal was present was crashing off into the brush. We could hear it. The horses were terrorized. To our amazement, a 7-inch diameter tree, which had served as one of the posts of our corral, had been snapped and bent over. It seemed odd that a bear would do this, but we had no reason to suspect otherwise. We shined the light off into the woods, but were not about to go tracking off into the dense woods at that time of night. We did not want to enter the corral with the horses worked up the way they were. We decided that they were slowly calming down in our presence, and we may as well go back to the tree to take a better look at how it was broken. That is when I came to know a fear that I didn't think possible. At and around the base of the tree were footprints which were obviously not bare. As we looked closer, the slow realization came upon us that these footprints were very large and very human-like. As the unthinkable became obvious, I felt a tingling wave sweep over my body, and the feeling that I was not present in my own body, but merely an observer from a distance. I could not accept what I knew was true. The prints were deeply implanted into the soil at the end of slip marks that were about 8 to 10 inches long. At the end of the slip marks were the deepest imprints. 5 very human-like toe prints. I believe this was caused by the animal's foot as it dug in to brace itself to break the tree. This is the first I have talked of this incident. Soon after it happened, I sold the property. I was never comfortable there after that night, always feeling I was being watched. To this day, I still suffer nightmares where I hear panicked horses and awaken to the vivid sight of those footprints lit in the flash of a lightning bolt. I had always been an avid and capable woodsman and hunter. I know game and the ways of wildlife. This is something that I cannot explain. You can use this as you wish. I am now 67 years old, and I think it needs to get out. Only my son, who sits with me as I write this, and I know what really happened that night. We agreed to tell my wife and daughter it was a bear and wiped out the prints. We do wish to remain anonymous as we feel our credibility and prestige in the area would be damaged. We are one of the largest landowners in the county. Back when I was a small child, like 3-5 years, I told my mom multiple times that my dad had an car accident and killed his friend and I was there. She would put this off as odd behavior and not think much of it, until she once told my dad, and he was totally shocked and looked at her like an insane person. Came out that before he was with my mom, he had a girlfriend, and while driving the car slipped and they crashed into a car where she died. There was no kid in there, but we can't explain how I knew it happened in the woods and that it was a crash against a tree. There were no kids on the car. It might sound crazy, but I can't remember this incident very much now. But since my parents somehow were involved with this case, it stayed a bit more in my brain. I apparently talked a lot of dumb stuff like telling my mom, "Remember when I was an adult back then, I always did X." Sadly, she didn't remember what exactly, and I don't either. Only that I somehow always felt as a kid I had a connection to events of past lives, but then got severed once I got older. My friend likes to go mushroom foraging, and one time she brought me along with her. We got further and further into the woods, getting distracted by cool rocks, different mushrooms, a cool stick, or even just by talking. We were having a great time, just the two of us, until we stumbled into a clearing where a man was sitting, skinning what looked like a deer. I was frozen for a second. I only moved to this yeehaw-ass town about 1.5 years ago. I'm from the Bronx, where you can see some weird stuff, but I am definitely not used to hunting culture. My friend and I were just sort of frozen. The man looked up, covered in blood, and said, "You know it's not safe for girls like you out here, right?" Then he let out a raspy laugh, instantly chilling my bones. He picked up his frighteningly large knife and just kept skinning the deer, muttering about all the dangerous animals in these woods. My friend and I were just nodding, not sure what else to say or do. He looked back up at us and said, "There's the bears, sure. The mountain lions, the fisher cats, and the rabid coons. But the most dangerous thing out here." He leaned forward and pointed the knife. "Man, the most dangerous game there is." My friend and I made eye contact and just booked it. Running through the woods, through bushes and thorns, we eventually found our way back to her property. Not sure if creepy hunter guy was just scaring us for shits and giggles, but it was creepy. I'd like to think he just got fun out of scaring 2 teenagers, but Jesus Christ. I'm not in the mood for this dude to pull a Robert Hansen. I'm 24 years old and female. This is a bit hard for me to write out, but I think it's important to address. So my parents split when I was young. Neither my dad nor my mom had their act together, which in turn caused me to not have my act together. From a young age, I was drinking and experimenting with recreational drugs. I was just falling into a cycle that my family has always been in. My mother had a tendency to sleep around with anyone that would give her the time of day. This meant inviting some really creepy guys into our home. I think it's important to mention that she was a drug addict and didn't consider the danger. I had been arrested a few times before the age of 15 for either fighting or underage drinking. I was a mess. One night my mom and her occasional boyfriend were waiting up when I stumbled in drunk. This was the moment I realized I needed a change. My mom's boyfriend had pushed me down and then pulled me into another room of the house. My mom started banging on the door, begging him to let me go. To this day, I still won't forget that sinister look on his face. It gives me chills just thinking about it. It was the face of someone who had bad intentions. It was a little smile, and I swear it's burnt into my brain. He said something along the lines of, "I'm about to show you why it's bad to let your mom worry about you." I screamed. He kept coming at me, but I put up a fight. After a couple minutes of struggle, I scratched him in the face. Then he became enraged. Thankfully, my mom had phoned the police, and he was arrested before anything serious happened. There was a cop that was always present when I got in trouble. He was around 60 at the time. I remember he was always giving me shit for my behavior. That night he was there. My mom was taken into custody along with her boyfriend, so I was sitting and waiting with him while they were getting my story. Then he said something to me I'll never forget. "I'm really sorry about all of this. I'm sorry, but you're not going home." And then he told me, "It's time for you to change. Do you want to end up like her, or do you want to be somebody?" I told him that I wanted to be somebody. I wanted to break that cycle. I was put into foster care, which was a horrible experience at first, but it ended up being what I needed. He and I stayed friends until he passed away about a year ago. I always went to him when I needed guidance. I'm happy to say that I've been a corrections officer for the past 2 years because of him, and I'm pleased to honor his memory by pursuing a career in law enforcement. Also losing me was what my mom needed to get her act together. She has been sober for almost 10 years and is remarried to a wonderful guy. Hopefully this was somewhat encouraging. Just before dawn, still dark, with a flashlight in one hand and a bow in the other, I snuck through the darkness as best as I could, careful not to snap a single branch that lay on the forest floor, making my way to my tree stand. Carefully and quietly, I climbed up and sat motionless. The sun began to rise, and out from the nearby swamp, one of the biggest bucks I had ever caught a glimpse of cautiously crept up over my left shoulder. Deer tend to move about and feed at dawn or dusk. This giant buck seemed to make sure to keep his body mass behind every tree, blocking any chance of me possibly taking my shot. Praying he would make his way to my small, but legal, bait area of apples and carrots, he circled and surveyed the woods, but regretfully, he walked back into the swamp. I sat there motionless, rethinking every step the large buck took. Could I have taken that chance of a bad shot? Should I have? Second-guessing every moment of that situation, occasionally sneaking a drink of water, opening a small jar of dough sent to mask my own. The rest of the day was peaceful yet extremely uneventful. Dusk approached. It was about 5 o'clock, maybe 5:30. I wasn't going to check my watch. Today was the last day of bow season, tomorrow was gun season. Every nut with a gun and a beer would be stomping through the woods nearby on the state land, shooting at anything that moved. Snap. Something broke a branch behind me. The small crunches on the ground were getting closer. My heart pounded. With every cautious crunch, I imagined that giant buck was back, and all my patience had finally paid off. I envisioned his every step as the noises became closer and closer. The noise stopped directly below me. Something was scraping my tree bark. My mind imagined the massive buck rubbing his magnificent rack lightly against my tree. Then abruptly, without a care in the world, I heard it. "Hey, check it out." This spot looks great. There's even some apples laying on the ground here. Then the other idiot said with a sinking feeling, "Dude, this is somebody's bait pile." Tweedledee and Tweedledum looked up at me and I just said, "What the F is wrong with you two? You're on private land. You had to have seen the signs that read, 'No trespassing,' and you crossed the barbed wire fence. Get the F off my property." Scary experience with my brother. So, this was in 2017. My brother was sleeping alone in his own room. As he was tucked in his sheets, he saw that the sheets were literally rising over him, as if something wanted to suffocate him under the sheets with no air supply. He was resisting, but the harder he resisted, the faster the sheets grew over him. He then said he tried to scream but couldn't. Then he heard a loud clang. Lord Hanneman's statue in our home fell down, and he could move freely now. He ran straight to my parents and sobbed. My parents were exchanging uncomfortable looks. I saw because I came out too. Then I noticed there was something like a black figure watching over us from about 5 meters away, waiting to attack again but couldn't. I believed it to be his nightmare, but I really couldn't figure out until now how a 6-foot statue fell down on its own when it had been standing straight for 5 years. So this happened when I was about 9 or something, I'm not completely sure. My friend and I were playing in my room with Barbies, but took a quick break when she had to pee. I decided it would be fun to hide behind my door to scare her. When I stood up and wanted to hide behind my door, I saw some sort of creature. I always thought of it as some sort of alien, but it could be something else. It certainly did not look human though. I don't know exactly how it looked, but I have a vague memory of its appearance because it's been so long ago. When I saw it, I felt intense fear. I could not move or breathe, and my heart was racing. I don't know how long I stood there, but eventually, I walked out of my room, and my friend came out of the bathroom. We both went back inside my room and resumed playing. At that moment, I did not remember what happened, but I still felt extremely scared. I must have looked scared too because she kept asking me if I was okay. I'm not sure when, but maybe a few days or weeks later, I started to remember what happened that day and became extremely scared to sleep. I never told my parents and kept it to myself. They just had to deal with me being scared, lol. I told my little brother a few years after it happened, but every time I talked about it or every time he joked about it, he didn't believe me. I would freak out, and this intense fear would fill up my body. The image of it standing there and the fear I felt stayed with me. I recently talked about it with my oldest brother because my younger one brought it up as a joke. My oldest brother really believes it could be an alien of some sort since he also believes to have seen one when he was younger. Does anyone have the same experience or any idea what this could have been? I'm also planning to ask my younger brother if he remembers me telling him any details about how it looked. I have always believed in spirituality and supernatural existence, but I have never had such a direct and validating first-hand experience with it. In July 2023, I was single and active on social media, dating apps, etc. I have an abundant mindset in dating, so I was messaging as many girls as possible while I was single and looking to mingle. I had a false and idiotic sense of safety, apparently. I added a girl I had found on Tinder or something, but had never met in person on Snapchat, a normal occurrence during that time, unfortunately. Instantly, I watched her story, and it was full of witchcraft, fortune-telling, and other stuff along those lines. Before I could even finish viewing the stories, I got a message like, "Who's this?" which is super understandable, of course. And before I had time to respond, this person, in under a minute of adding me, blurted out my grandmother's full name and address, her dog's name, my mom's legal name, most people don't know it, and she never goes by it, my childhood address, my current address, and potentially other details I had forgotten. They basically threatened me to leave them alone, and that they knew all this because one of their minions follows me. Of course, someone could find these things if they had enough information, time, and a bizarre desire for personal details. But we're talking 20 to 30 seconds or less. It was so fast, in fact, that I don't even think it could have normally been typed up as fast as it was sent. It was as if it was copied and pasted. This shook me up enough to block them instantly, and to go through my followers and block any minion-type people. Lol. My family, including myself, had fallen upon some bad fortune since then, and I can't shake the slight paranoia that perhaps this person had cast something onto us. If you have any insight, thoughts, or questions on this, please comment, as I want to better understand what I experienced. The drive to Algonquin Park lasted longer than expected. After running into traffic and making a few wrong turns along the way, we got there late in the afternoon. My dad paid the fees at the front gate and proceeded to drive the remaining kilometers into the park. We eventually found our way to the canoe launch and got out of the van, stretching our legs. My dad and Uncle Steve were looking over the maps, which appeared to have been hand-drawn by park rangers and were encased in clear plastic. I watched as they traced the route we would be traveling. They both agreed that it shouldn't be too complicated to make it to the campground, despite the fact that we had been delayed getting there. A little bit late in the day to start a portaging trip, said a park ranger to my dad as we were packing the last of our camping supplies into the canoes. We're meeting up with some friends who are out there waiting for us. They've already set up camp, so we've just got to make it to the island. Well, be careful. Once it gets dark in Algonquin, it becomes a whole different world. You folks be safe now. Thanks, we will. My dad had lectured us the whole way there in a similar fashion, and I couldn't help but grin to hear him getting a taste of his own medicine. Apparently, there were people who got lost in the park every year, never to be seen again. There were bears and wolves, coyotes and other animals in the wilderness, and we would be guests in their domain. I climbed into the front of one boat and my uncle took a seat at the back. My brother was in the other canoe and my dad climbed in awkwardly, nearly tipping it over in the process. The water was crystal clear and pristine, and I could see minnows swimming in the shallows, frogs and tadpoles. I took a deep breath in, enjoying the crisp fresh air of the northern outdoors, and admired a great blue heron that was resting in the shade nearby. Paddling along the river, we found our way towards a lake which opened up before us, revealing our first glimpse at the pristine beauty of the provincial park. The silence was overwhelming, away from car mufflers and computer fans and the constant noise of the city. The sense of sudden peace was overwhelming. All I could hear was the sound of my paddle slicing through the calm water, and the occasional call of a bird from the surrounding pine forest that engulfed us. Other trees and plant life lined the lake as well. Maples and white birches. Some pale-looking twisted trees sprang from the high cliffs above, growing against all odds, their roots hanging on from rocky outcrops that ranged in rusty reddish colors. My brother Noel and my dad were struggling with their canoe coordination. Noel and I frequently went fishing using the canoes at our cabin when we went up there, so I knew he wasn't the one having issues. It was my dad. My dad had never operated a canoe before, I realized in that moment. Although he'd spoken confidently saying he knew what he was doing, he was struggling. He had insisted on sitting in the rear of the canoe, which is the most crucial position in the boat, since you act as the rudder, and also the primary source of power. Noel was fruitlessly paddling away up front while my dad lackadaisically slapped at the water, sending the boat veering back and forth in a zigzag pattern. His ineffectual efforts eventually caused Noel to get slightly annoyed, and I heard them bickering with each other. I looked back at them trailing far behind us and saw their twisting, turning path was taking them all over the lake, whereas we were traveling in more or less a straight line. Has your dad ever paddled a canoe before? Steve asked. I think it's been a while by the looks of it. Oh boy, maybe he should let Noel steer. Yeah, I'll suggest it at the first stop. We arrived at the first place where we had to portage across a short stretch. For those who aren't familiar, this means you have to carry your canoe across dry land for a little ways to get to the next river or lake so that you can continue your trip. If you have a cooler and luggage and other items, you have to hike back and forth, sometimes 2 or 3 times. This is when it comes in handy to pack light. It took us 2 trips to bring everything, including the canoes, to the other side. The hike between lakes was about 10 minutes, so it wasn't too strenuous. That was the easy one according to the map, my Uncle Steve said. The next one is much further. Great, I thought to myself. I guess it'll be my job to carry the cooler again too. We got back in the carved wooden boats and started paddling once more. My uncle had the map and was directing us which way to go, while my brother followed with my dad in the other canoe. At least he had managed to get him to switch seats though. As we went along, I saw they were now keeping pace with us, with Noel at the rear of the boat generating more power, and his more experienced paddling keeping them on course. What do you guys know about the legends of the Algonquin? My uncle asked us, making conversation. He and my dad both had a wealth of knowledge on various topics, but things like this were my uncle's specialty. He was an avid outdoorsman and a skilled fisherman who took a deep interest in Aboriginal culture and the stories they told over generations. Nothing really, I said. So you've never heard of the Memikwesi? We all stayed silent and waited for him to explain. My uncle was a bit of a jokester as well, so it was hard to tell if he was kidding sometimes. He liked to put on a straight face and tell an elaborate lie in the form of a story, just to take you along for the ride. So we waited to see if he was trying to fool us before answering yes or no. They're water spirits. Mischievous little buggers. They'll steal your camping supplies if you're not careful. Food, clothes, fishing rods, whatever they like. And they can send your canoe off course too. You'll be just paddling along like we are now, and the Memikwesi will send you off from the proper course and you'll wind up lost. If you don't show them the proper respect, that is. Okay, enough with that, Steve. Quit trying to scare the kids with that crap. We're barely gonna make it to the campsite before dark as it is. Turn right up ahead here. The map says it's going to be over this way. We veered our boats over in that direction at my dad's insistence, and I noticed we were in a very shallow section full of reeds and plants. The canoes were almost touching the bottom of the lake. Should we go this way? I don't think that's what the map is saying. My uncle was looking at the narrow river doubtfully. The area we were headed towards looked like a swamp, and mosquitoes were already beginning to land on me and bite my neck as we got closer. My dad and uncle pondered over the map for a while, and my brother and I sat there and slapped at the bugs landing on us. Eventually, they decided to take the route which led us down the shallow, winding river surrounded by tall reeds. I could tell by the silence of them both that they were not sure if this way was correct. The further we got, and the more time passed, I noticed the sun had begun to set. Pretty soon it was almost dark outside, and the water eventually became so shallow that it nearly dried up. The river had turned into a muddy creek, and we were forced to turn around. Uh-oh, my dad said. We must have gone the wrong way. We'll have to go back to that lake. I think I read the map wrong. My uncle bit his tongue, and we paddled back against the current. The lake was empty, and it was completely dark by the time we got back to it. There was no moon that night and nothing to light our way. My dad told me to get out a flashlight and cast the beam towards shore, looking for a reflective sign with the symbol for a portage point. Just keep that flashlight pointed at the shore, and tell us if you see a reflective sign anywhere, Jordan. This next portage should take us to the lake with the campsite, so there shouldn't be too much farther to go after we find it. My heartbeat was quickening with anxious fear as our canoes traveled along near the shore in almost total darkness. I swung the flashlight beam around to check for dead heads and rocks in our path, and told my uncle to veer left or right to avoid hitting things that would have tipped us over. We gotta be careful. Don't want to fall into these waters. There's another legend that the people of this area used to speak of, my uncle said while he paddled, trying to distract us from the precarious situation we had gotten ourselves into. The Mishijanibig. It's a huge horned serpent. It lives in lakes and eats people. Okay, Steve, that's about enough. My dad was yelling when my ears caught a sound that I couldn't place. It was steady and persistent, coming from just ahead. RSSHHH. The canoes were picking up speed. I looked back and saw that my dad and uncle weren't paddling, weren't paying attention at all. They were just arguing with each other about who had taken the wrong turn. You and your ridiculous legends. You're distracting us all with this useless garbage. Don't say that. You're going to upset them. You should apologize. I finally managed to find my voice and I yelled back at them. There's a waterfall up ahead. We're paddling towards a waterfall. They chuckled and told me that was ridiculous. There was no waterfall on the map. Then they began to bicker again, and I started to get extremely nervous. The canoes were moving faster and faster, but nobody was paddling anymore. I was just a kid, so they weren't listening to me. "Can't you see what's happening?" I yelled at them. "Look how fast we're moving. There's a waterfall up ahead." They abruptly stopped arguing, and now the sound of rushing water could be distinctly heard from up ahead. "Okay, let's start paddling towards shore." "I think we need to start paddling towards shore right now." My dad was trying to sound calm, but I could hear the panic in his voice. We all began to paddle as hard as we could. In the dim light, I could barely see anything but the silhouette of trees all around us and the ink-black water of the lake. Shimmering reflections of stars were floating on the surface of it, speeding past at an increasing rate. We began to make some headway, getting closer to the shoreline, but then suddenly our efforts became futile. We were being sucked in, drawn inextricably towards the waterfall. I looked ahead and saw it drawing close. The night sky sat serenely above the surface of the turbulent black water, which flowed downwards, disappearing from sight. And when I saw how close it was, I screamed. Watching in horror, I saw us go over the edge, and the world tipped sickeningly upside down as I fell. Becoming weightless was a harrowing experience, as for a moment I floated through the air, my screams echoing out into the night. The wolves howled in response, and I descended, looking down to see jagged rocks waiting for us below. Far, far, far down below. We fell, and our screams echoed across the lake. I tried to point my feet downwards, afraid of what might happen if I impacted the water incorrectly. After what felt like forever, I landed in the frigid depths below. The surface of it hit me with so much force that it nearly knocked the wind out of me, and I struggled to breathe as I gasped from the cold, sinking downwards. The weight of my boots dragged me below, and I kicked, trying to get them off my feet. They felt like cinder blocks, and as my head dipped beneath the surface of the water, I gulped it in, and it went up my nose, stinging my sinuses. I called out for help, but my pleas were drowned by the water once more. My head went under again, and this time I stayed down longer. Struggling to get back to the surface, I looked around in the murky water and saw a pair of eyes glaring back at me from the depths. Yellow eyes that were unblinking and massive, glowing in the darkness. A tipped-over canoe was close by when I got to the surface, and I grabbed hold of it and took a gasping breath of air. My dad and brother were okay, I saw. And my uncle had survived the fall too, although his head sustained a large gash, and he appeared dazed and hurt. "You need to apologize, Dave," my uncle told my father, sounding drunk now, his words slurred and difficult to understand. "You've disrespected the spirits here. Apologize before they kill us all." "What? Those stories you were telling to scare the kids, are you still talking about that shit?" Suddenly, I felt something wrap around my ankle, and although I held onto the canoe as firmly as I could, I felt myself being dragged down. There was no time to scream, but I tried to take a breath of air before being pulled down below. My uncle's hand reached down and managed to grab mine, and he held on to me for dear life. I felt like I would be pulled in two as the thing from the depths tore at my leg, yanking me downwards. As the time passed beneath the water, my need to breathe became more urgent. I began to thrash and kick my legs, trying desperately to free myself from the thing which was pulling me down. My heartbeat was loud and fast in my ears, and I looked in terror to see the yellow eyes of the thing were very close now. It was coming towards me, and in the black murky water I could just barely make out its massive horned head and gaping maw. Huge fangs and a split tongue could be seen in the dim light as the snake came face to face with me. The massive beast was so large it could swallow me whole, I realized, and I cringed and waited for that to happen, momentarily resigned to my fate. But then a light shone down from the surface. A bright torch lamp made the snake cringe and recoil in fear. It loosened its grip on my leg, and I felt my uncle pull me towards the surface. My vision was clouding red and black, and as I began to feel like I was passing out, I broke through the surface of the water and was pulled up onto a large canoe. Our friends who had been at the campsite waiting for our arrival had heard us screaming as we went over the waterfall. The campsite was close by, and they had quickly gotten in their boat to come rescue us once they realized what had happened. If not for them, we would have been dead. At least so it seemed. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. My dad was repeating the words over and over. It's not your fault, Dave. These things happen, his friend Randy was saying as we paddled over towards the campsite. At least nobody got hurt, right? That's the important thing. My uncle rubbed his bleeding forehead and rolled his eyes at me. Thanks, Uncle Steve, I said to him quietly. He nodded and said, no problem, kiddo. I saw the horned serpent down there, Uncle Steve. I think you're right. We should probably be respectful of the creatures around here. I don't want to get on that guy's bad side again. He smiled, his eyes shining red for just a second in the moonlight, and I noticed his face appeared different, like someone else entirely. A being which had been sent to help us, both ancient and wise. Just wait until I tell you the tale of the Great Rabbit. I've got plenty of stories, and each with a lesson. For those who will listen, and who have ears to hear. He put 2 fingers up over his head, making little bunny ears, and smiled.
I live in the center of a small country town in a shitty apartment building with my mother. As cliché as it sounds, it's true. Now, scary stories and ghost fanatics always piqued my interest, but I have never thought twice about a bump in the night or a tapping on the window. That was until 3 weeks ago. It was a normal night for me. Fall asleep at about 11 p.m. and wake up a few times throughout the night. My bedroom was on the 2nd floor, and because the apartment was so cheap and dingy, every time you stepped there would be a long creak along with it. Now I'm a light sleeper, so every single small sound wakes me up, but I always fall asleep a few seconds after. This one particular thing that woke me up, though, was the sound of creaking footsteps walking across the floorboards towards my room. I was in a position in which I was facing away from my doorway, and instead facing my dry wall next to my bed. Immediately, I was pissed off that Mom would even be up in the middle of the night. What time was it anyway? I was usually easily irritable, seeing as I always felt tired. I was such a light sleeper, it always felt like I barely slept a wink. The fact that I was being woken up by someone during my precious sleep egged me on to no end. I felt the urge to call out and snap at her, but decided against it. She was probably as tired as I was, and was most likely just going to the toilet. Her footsteps stopped outside my room, and I sighed in frustration. To my surprise, I heard the door handle turn, and the door lightly creaked open. At the time, I had recently scared my mother with an unaliving myself attempt, so it wasn't uncommon for her to check up on me before she went to sleep and when she woke up. I figured that she was having late night thoughts or something, and she wanted to just check in on me. Oddly enough, I pretended to sleep like I usually did whenever she did this. I don't know why, but I figured it would be awkward if my eyes flung open as my mother was kissing my cheek. She would usually just lightly touch my foot and whisper me goodnight before heading off to bed herself. But she didn't step foot into my room. She stayed at the doorway, her breathing slightly ragged. I was confused and mostly annoyed, but kept my eyes shut and my back to her. It must have been a good minute or so before she turned and made her way down the stairs, which were just outside of my room. At the time, I didn't think anything of it. I simply shrugged it off, turned over, and fell back asleep. That was until the next morning, when I awoke from an incoming call from my mom. I tiredly reached over to my bedside table and put the phone to my ear. Maybe she had gone out to the store and needed to ask me something. There'd be no reason to call my while we were in the same house. Hello? My voice croaked with the first word of the day leaving my lips. Hey, darling. Sorry for not coming home last night. I got a bit carried away with the alcohol. She ended it with a laugh. My heart dropped. What? I said I got a bit carried away. No, before that. Sorry for not coming home last night. She seemed a bit confused, and my eyes never left the ajar door of my room, evidence that someone or something had opened it last night. Is everything all right, sweetie? Deciding not to worry her, I reassured her that everything was okay and hung up. I had completely forgotten that I was home alone. Now, nothing has happened since then, but I've been scared shitless and sleeping with the lights on every night. I just hope that whatever it was, it doesn't come back. And if it does, I just hope it doesn't catch me awake. I spoke to my mother about it, and she got freaked out, thinking it was a burglar. We checked for hours but found nothing stolen, nothing out of place. Deep down, I had a gut feeling it was something paranormal. Looking back on it now, I'm glad that I pretended to be asleep. God knows what it would have done if it knew that I was awake. I am genuinely scared and concerned about what just happened to me yesterday. I am currently under the covers in my bed, frantically typing this on my phone, because I'm too scared to get up and check up on my mother. For the past 2 weeks, my mother was away on a business trip. Since I'm 18 and working, she allowed me to stay at the house alone to do some housekeeping. My mother and I live in a pretty big house in middle of nowhere, Texas, so 2 weeks alone in the house gets lonely. We are new to the area as we just moved in a couple of months ago, so for the past 14 days, I've been cooped up in our giant home alone and have been waiting for my mother to come home. So yesterday night, when I heard the familiar jingle of her keys and front door open, I was excited to see my mother. I got up from my bed and ran down to the kitchen to ask her about the trip. That's when I noticed my mother just standing at the kitchen counter, not acknowledging me at all. She didn't say hi to me or tell me that she missed me. She didn't even look up at me. My mother grew up through the Vietnam War. She has lived through seeing people killed in front of her. She spent her teenage years hopping from refugee camp to refugee camp. Basically, my mother has seen the worst of the worst in humanity. Despite her difficult upbringing, my mother has always been extremely loving and talkative, and our relationship is extremely close. So I was confused about what could have shaken her up so bad that she wouldn't acknowledge me. She simply returned home, placed her bags on the kitchen floor, and headed straight to her bedroom. I didn't want to pry my mother about what happened on the trip, so I headed back to my room without a word to give her time to herself. I was going to ask her about it the next day. This morning I woke up to a FaceTime from my mom. This was strange since my mother is the type of person to come upstairs to wish me a good morning. I answered regardless, and that's when my heart dropped. My mother was still at the airport. She said something along the lines of, "Sorry baby, I'm running a bit late since my flight is delayed. I will be home by dinner." If my mom was still at the airport, then who the hell came home last night? I just stared at my mom over the FaceTime for a while until I finally answered back. "Mama, if you are still at the airport, then who came home last night?" My mom's face dropped, and she told me to hang up the call and hide under the covers. She sounded genuinely frightened, and I have never seen my mother like that for the past 18 years she has raised me. That obviously scared the shit out of me, so I did as she said and hung up immediately. After I hung up, my mother texted me, "If whoever is in the house asks you to leave your room, do not listen to them. Stay in your room, Con. I'm calling Koba." That's when I heard my fake mother from the bottom of the stairs go, "Con, I have breakfast ready. Come down, baby." I literally don't know what to do and am scared shitless. I'm currently waiting for my Uncle Koba to arrive. Well, this just happened to me, but first a little bit about the location and whatnot. I live in a fairly small, pretty old neighborhood. Everyone knows one another. Some have watched many of the kids, including me, grow up over the years. I myself have lived in this house since I was 2 years old, and I'll be 17 on November 4. The road is old and cracked. I know every crack by heart. The neighborhood is basically a huge circle with a few cul-de-sacs, sorry spelling is iffy, thrown in. I'm an active girl. I get home, eat and walk my 2 dogs as well as a neighbor's dog. She's basically mine, but she can't live with me just yet until it gets dark. Usually by then my brother is walking with me, and we are being retards, just acting as friends do. He usually walks me home when it gets dark. Guys, I am petrified of the dark, but I'm fine if someone is with me. Mainly it's the things in the dark that terrify me. Tonight my brother decided I was going to have to walk home alone. I find the nearest street light, sit on the curb, and text my boyfriend to call me, so at least if I'm murdered or assaulted he can call for help. Well, as I'm chatting with him and walking along the worn road, I hear, like a dog's nails clicking on the asphalt. Thinking it's a stray, I turn around, to see nothing. Thinking it's my paranoid brain, I continue up the gently sloping hill leading home. Then there it is again, that nail clicking, only this time joined by a weird whistling. Only I can't really describe it. It was like a low note, then a high followed by a drawn-out low note. I wish I could describe it better. Anyways, this whistling would change locations. It would be right in my ear, or 10 feet behind me, or right in my face, or so faint I barely hear it over my boyfriend's deep voice. I ask him if he hears anything, but nope, nothing. The nail clicking continues. Going under yet another blessed street light, I see the shadow of a dog beside mine, and I almost flip out. I try to assure myself that it means no harm because I haven't heard any growling, just clicking nails. As I'm waking through my dark front yard, the whistling sounds loudly in my ear once more before dissipating. But the nail clicking remains, especially when I walk on my wood floor in my living room. I retire to my room as I always do, and I can feel that this dog hasn't left me. See, I don't see ghosts really well, but I feel them in my gut, like you know something's there, but you can't see them. It doesn't feel threatening, just curious and lonely. Well, my significant other suggests I call to that dog and see if it responds or something. I feel my bed move as something lands on it, and with light panting something lays on my bed. There's an indentation, and I'm kinda creeped out, and I also feel safer. I have no idea, but this dog that started following me, I have no idea whether it's going to stay or leave. This is why I don't walk alone at night. Among reasons. A few years ago, I decided I needed a major life change. Everything seemed to be going downhill: my finances, my mental health, my life. I would go weeks without sleeping, sometimes as the heavy traffic passed through the city streets down below. Every time I went outside, I saw more homeless people, more needles and crack pipes littering the ground, more muggings and assaults and overdoses and deaths. The city had become a wasteland, and I knew it was time to leave. I had no girlfriend, no wife, no kids. My parents had both died a few years prior, and I barely talked to my siblings anymore. I had nothing to tie me down to this place where I felt like I was dying inside a little more each day. That was when I sold nearly everything I owned, got in my car and drove up to Alaska to try starting anew. I bought a small cabin and a plot of land in the middle of its majestic mountains and dark, enchanting forests. In the winter, the northern lights would shine through like the eyes of God, sending out divine trails of light that danced through the sky in cosmic waves. And while the move did help give me some peace of mind, in the end, the source of all my problems had ultimately followed me thousands of miles into this endless wilderness. It would take me a long time to realize the cause of all this misery was myself. Because, as a wise man once said, wherever I go, there I am. I lived in that cabin for 3 months without any major issues other than the constant threat of bears, moose, and wolves. I had a rifle and a shotgun for hunting, a small garden in the backyard, and a solar panel to generate electricity. This is the life, I said, relaxing on a hammock I had strung across the corner of the cabin while staring at the endless beauty directly outside the window. White-capped mountains loomed like giants in front of thick clusters of evergreens. A virgin covering of fluffy snow made the entire world glisten and sparkle. There wasn't a house or road in sight. No work, no stress, no pollution, no cars honking all the time. I closed my eyes, breathing in the clean air. I ended up falling asleep for a couple hours, waking up just as the sun had started setting. Bright orange streaks mixed with the bloody smears of the fading light as it disappeared behind the mountains. I groggily arose, stumbling over to make a cup of instant coffee. As I sipped it, I wandered around the room, looking for something to pass the time. There were still quite a few random objects left behind by the last owner that I hadn't gotten rid of yet. I had moved in to find a stocked bookshelf filled with classics by Philip K. Dick, Isaac Asimov, and Robert Heinlein. Bored, I started rifling through the collection, looking for something good to pass the time. As I shuffled past A Maze of Death and Ubik, something caught my eye. A black, leather-bound book with no title or author name stood there, its cover faded with time and wear. Curious, I pulled it out and opened it. I saw the cursive scrawled across the pages in a neat, copperplate script and realized it was a diary left behind by the previous owner. The first entry was dated January 9th, 2015. This is what it said. I don't know if I'm going crazy or not. I went into town to talk to my therapist yesterday, and she said I should try writing everything down. She talks to me like it's all in my head. but I know it's not. When I first moved into the cabin, it seemed like paradise. I never thought in a million years that something would be slinking around at night. I never thought it would be hiding under my bed, peeking in windows and following me like a shadow. Right now, I'm snowed in with a cup of coffee in one hand and my pistol in the other. I can't sleep anymore. I keep hearing something shuffling around under the bed. Sometimes I think I even hear ragged breathing, as if a corpse with dirt in its lungs had come back to life. I've caught glimpses of that thing in the darkness. Whatever it is, its skin is loose, almost falling off the bone. It almost looks like a naked, emaciated man. Its eyes are rotted and dark, its back hunched, its spine twisted and jutting out like tumors. It moves in this slow, jerky way, but I can never seem to catch it. Its body seems broken and out of alignment. Its legs bend the wrong way sometimes. By the time I turn on the lights or try to take a video of it, it's always disappeared. But its fetid odor remains. It lingers in the cabin like a sweet-smelling, spreading infection. I don't know what it wants from me. I want to leave, but with the storm raging outside, I'm stuck here, unable to get all the way back to town. The snow surrounds the cabin in mounds 5 feet high. I feel like a prisoner caged with a rabid beast, not knowing when it will strike. My wife claims she hasn't seen or heard anything, but she keeps vanishing on me. Last night, she disappeared in the middle of a snowstorm. Where did she go? I asked her in the morning, but she said she was here the whole time. She didn't remember anything. There's no way she went into town. There wasn't time and the trails were impassable that far down. Something's going on here, but I don't know what it is. I'm truly scared for our lives. I slammed the diary shut, not wanting to read anymore. I didn't want to become infected by some kind of contagious cabin fever. If the last owner had gone insane in the mountains and started hallucinating naked corpses crawling around, I really didn't want to know. I shoved the diary back in the bookshelf, going for A Maze of Death instead. I tried to forget what I had read in the diary as I flew through the novella. All night, I tried to get the image of the naked, twisting man with rotted eyes out of my head, but I couldn't. I eventually fell asleep right before dawn. But as my eyes were closing, I thought I saw a silhouette in the window, a starved man with excited, black eyes that seemed to be rotting out of his skull. I thought I saw him put his inhumanly long fingers against the glass as he leaned forward. I blinked, sitting up and glancing out into the white, snow-covered wonderland. There was nothing there. Another hunter occasionally followed the deer trails near my cabin. A frozen lake stood a quarter-mile away, the surface white and covered in thick drifts of snow. I bundled up, deciding to go outside for a hike in the frigid dawn. I strapped on my snowshoes and grabbed my shotgun, as I always did when I went outside. I never knew when a polar bear might be waiting around the next tree, after all. I opened the door, seeing footprints pressed into the snow all around my house. At first, I thought it was that silhouette I had seen, the nightmarish thing from the diary. But the footprints didn't go over to my window. They followed the trail 20 feet away, veering off towards the frozen lake at the bottom of the hill. I glanced down in that direction, seeing a black figure plodding slowly forward. "Steve," I cried, recognizing my only neighbor in a 4-mile radius. He had a cabin about a mile away on his own little plot of land. He jumped, clearly startled by the sudden noise. His black snow pants and heavy fur coat swished together as he spun, raising his rifle high. When he saw me, he immediately lowered it and put a gloved hand up in a friendly greeting. "Hey Josh, surprised to see you up this early," he yelled over the muted wintry landscape. Sounds always seemed different after it snowed, as if all the noise in the world had become faded and dead. "Yeah, I've been having a little trouble sleeping," I said, slinging my shotgun around my shoulder. "What are you doing anyway?" "Just a little hunting, you know," he said, giving me a sly wink. "Animals are always most active around dusk and dawn, it seems. That's when I always have the best luck anyway." He stepped close to me, staring me in the eyes. "You do look like shit. Those bags under your eyes are big enough to carry groceries in." "Yeah, trust me, I know." "Hey, this might sound a little weird, but did you know the previous owner of this cabin?" I asked. Steve's wrinkled, old face fell into a scowl. His expression immediately became guarded and distant. Sure, we met," he exclaimed bluntly. He seemed to be searching my face for something, but I didn't know what. His reaction left me feeling off balance and nervous. "Is he still around?" I said. Steve's scowl deepened. "Buddy, I don't know what this is about, but he's dead. He's been dead. He died in that cabin, actually." He pointed a finger at my home accusingly. With those words, my heart seemed to drop into my stomach. Waves of dread flowed through my body like water. "How? How did he die? Like a heart attack or something?" I asked. Steve's gaze turned downwards. He didn't meet my eyes. "Do you know that Alaska has the highest missing persons rate in the entire United States? It's not even close. In fact, for the population size, we have far more people who go missing and never get found than anywhere else. They even have a name for it, the Alaska Triangle," Steve said. "And we're square in the middle of it." I stared blankly at him, wondering where he was going with this. It seemed like a way to avoid answering my question. "No, I didn't know that," I responded. Steve nodded, raising his head again. He heaved a deep sigh. "Look, the thing with the last owner and his wife. It's somewhat disturbing. If you really want to know, I'll tell you, but it's certainly not going to help your peace of mind. And it definitely isn't going to help you get some sleep." "I want to know," I insisted instantly. The wind started to whip past us. Flakes of ice and snow flew sideways in the sudden currents. "Let's go back to your cabin then," Steve said, pulling his heavy fur-lined hood off and shaking out his long, black hair behind him. I could use a bit of whiskey to warm up. We sat down with a bottle of Johnny Walker and 2 shot glasses. I wasn't much of a drinker, but Steve certainly was. He chugged 3 shots in the span of a minute. I sipped at mine, drinking half and putting it back down on the coffee table with a thunk. Steve grunted, hissing through his open mouth for a moment. "Ugh, that's the good stuff," he said, slamming his chest as the burning liquor worked its way down. Steve looked up at me with a new sparkle in his eyes. So you want to know about what happened to Will Lenning? Well, I'll tell you that no one really knows the whole story. I used to see him occasionally, come down and have a drink and talk. We all know each other around here, obviously." I nodded, motioning him on. He seemed like a normal, upstanding guy. He kinda reminded me of you, actually. A young guy trying to escape the hustle and bustle of the city life. The cancer of the American dream. Well, he was here for maybe a couple months, I don't know. Everything seemed fine. We used to go skeet shooting occasionally, have a beer, you know. We'd get together with a couple other hunters who live closer to town and sometimes play some poker. I never saw anything odd about Will. I never could have predicted what happened to him. He heaved a long sigh at this, looking out the window at the sharp mountains with an expression of nostalgia. "Well, what happened to him?" I asked, encouraging him to go on. He started talking about seeing someone peering in through his window at night. He talked about hearing sounds from under his bed, while he was laying there in the dark, sounds like diseased breathing and shuffling. He started keeping all the lights on in his cabin 24 hours a day. Steve leaned close to me. A glimmer of fear rippled across his pale, wrinkled face. He started to lose his mind. Started digging holes all over the place, looking for something. Even in the middle of snowstorms, I would occasionally see him outside digging. It seemed like he never slept anymore. It was classic cabin fever if I ever saw it. It was only a few weeks later that I came over here concerned. I hadn't heard from him in a few days, which was fairly unusual. I found the door hanging wide open. Propped up in a chair in the exact spot where you now sit, Will lay with a blast hole showing clear through his skull, a shotgun laying at his feet. And next to him, I found a blood-stained diary open to the middle page. The last entry was stained with blood spatter, but still visible. I remember leaning down and reading it. It was only a few sentences long. I glanced over at the bookshelf with the same diary, saying nothing. It said something like, "I see now what's going on. The twisted man is leading me to the truth. Today, I will finally find it." "And that was his after-death note?" I asked, my heart hammering in my chest. He nodded. "Yeah, I went into town and got some rangers to come check it out. Eventually, they got cops and CSI there. They took all the stuff as evidence, including the diary," he said. "Good riddance, I say. Reading something like that is never beneficial. Sometimes delusions spread like a virus, you know what I mean." I did, but I said nothing. I glanced back at the diary, its black leather cover gleaming like a crouching snake. and I wondered if the police took the diary as evidence. How did it get back here? You said he had a wife living here with him too, I asked. Yeah, she went missing around the same time, he said. Pretty bizarre. The cops thought maybe she just moved away, but... He shook his head grimly. As far as I know, she was never seen again. It was like she had evaporated into thin air. After Steve left, I walked stiffly over to the bookshelf, taking down the diary. I flipped open through the pages. In the middle, I found the last entry. Spatters of old, darkened blood were scattered over the page like raindrops. I found the after-death note and read the date. January 27, 2015, it read, Will Lenning had not lived long after he started seeing the twisted man. I wondered if my fate would be the same. The sun had started to set outside as I sat with the diary at the small circular kitchen table, eating some stewed venison and rice as I read through the entries. At the end, Will Lenning said the twisted man had been trying to guide him somewhere, that in fact, the twisted man had been trying to protect him from some great evil, rather than being the source of it. I scoffed, feeling a flash of anger at his stupidity. His naivety obviously led to his death. But then a flash of insight struck me like lightning. What if I was committing the same kind of stupidity? Perhaps I should just grab my gun and valuables and leave. I could take off on the snowmobile and be in town within a couple hours. But in my heart, I knew I would not. Something about the mystery of all this beckoned me to stay. Like a siren leading sailors to destruction, my curiosity called out to me, and I knew I would not be leaving that night. I needed answers, and sadly, I would find them. I had fallen asleep with an empty bottle of beer in my hand. I sat in front of the TV, which only got satellite reception. There were, of course, no cable or phone lines threading their way through the forest. All of my power came from stored solar energy. Since I rarely watched TV and really only used it to cook or heat up water for bathing, the energy produced was sufficient even in winter. Tonight, though, I needed its sound, its mindless flashing of light and colors and canned laughter. It seemed to drive away the creeping, suffocating presence like a candle. I woke suddenly. The TV flashed with static. The repetitive hissing of the white noise spit from the speakers like thousands of snakes. I glanced up at the clock. 3:33 a.m. I looked around the dark cabin, confused for a long moment. I didn't understand what had woken me so abruptly. The satellite had never gone out before either, even with the howling winds and freezing hail of the Alaskan winter. The TV started flickering, as if the static were rising upwards. Black lines traced their way horizontally across the screen. The hissing deepened into a gurgle, and for a second, I thought I heard faint words behind the white noise. I thought I heard breathing, slow and diseased like the death gasp of a drowning man. A black line rose across the TV, and an image came into view. The cabin was suddenly plunged into silence, except for the shrieking, wintry wind outside. I leaned close to the screen, confused at what I was looking at. It looked like a live camera feed of a room. As I took in the details, I realized it was my cabin. I saw myself in the chair, leaning close to the screen. I raised my hand, and the miniature version of me on the screen did likewise. Ice water seemed to drip down my spine as waves of dread coursed through my body. "What the F is this?" I whispered, looking back to where the camera should be. It was just a coarse wooden ceiling in that corner. I turned back to the screen and nearly screamed. The TV showed a pale, naked man crouching directly behind my chair now. With jerky movements he rose, his broken spine twisting and shivering. A hissing voice rang out from the speakers. It spoke as if it had dirt and writhing maggots in its throat. "He is a killer. The shadow of death," it gurgled. "Many have fallen. Many lie buried across this forest. You will be next. He is watching you." Long, broken fingers with blackened nails reached out to touch my shoulders. I jumped out of the chair, stumbling back as I spun around in terror. My back smashed into the TV, and it fell to the floor with a shattering of glass and an explosion of light. In those few moments before the darkness descended on me like a blanket, I thought I glimpsed a pale, sunken face with rotted, blackened eyes peeking out from behind the chair. I turned on every light in the cabin, but there was no sign of the twisted man now. I knew I had to get out of there, though. I thought about the warning that the voice had spoken. If the creature wanted to attack me, then why hadn't it just killed me while I was sleeping? None of it made sense. Who was watching me? The twisted man. And if he was, why warn me? Perhaps it was psychological warfare, I thought to myself. Perhaps the twisted man simply liked to play with his food before he ate it. Thoughts raced through my head at 1,000 miles an hour as I threw on snow pants and a couple heavy sweaters and coats. I covered up my entire body as much as I could to try to prevent frostbite. I had made up my mind to flee. There was no snowstorm tonight, though the entire landscape was blanketed in it, and I knew the wind chill would be like an ice blade whipping against my skin. It was extremely dangerous to travel in the middle of the night like this in temperatures that might reach -30 degrees. Steve had been right. After all, Alaska had the highest missing persons rate of any state, and many of them were never found, their bodies likely frozen solid in the deep snow dozens of miles from the nearest town. I grabbed my shotgun, jumped on my snowmobile, and started heading to Steve's cabin. I hoped I could wait there until the sunrise and then figure out what to do next. But fate would take the decision out of my hands. I felt like there were eyes watching me as I drove along the narrow, winding deer trail. The boughs of the evergreens reached into the path like greedy hands, grabbing at my coat and legs. More than a couple times, I thought I saw a pale, naked figure standing in the snow, but it had always gone when I turned to look. I gave a sigh of relief when Steve's place appeared in the distance. I could see the lights twinkling through the small windows of his log cabin. I pulled up next to his door, looking down. I saw 2 pairs of footprints there, one much smaller than the other. I found it odd, but shrugged it off. The snowmobile cut out with a sucking gurgle. I knocked on the door hard a few times. Steve appeared after a few moments, groggy and half-dressed. He blinked slowly as he looked me up and down. His wrinkled face fell into a frown. "Steve, I need a favor," I said quickly. "Something weird is happening in my cabin. Can I stay here until morning, until maybe I can go to town or something? I can't stay at my place tonight. I just can't." He nodded, yawning and motioning me in. "You can sleep on the couch, I guess," Steve said. "Put that shotgun somewhere safe though, boy." He had a partitioned bedroom in his cabin. It was significantly larger than my little one-room cabin, though it was basically still just a joint kitchen living room, a small bedroom and a bathroom. He pointed to a well-worn couch in the corner and gave me an apathetic wave as he stumbled back into his bedroom, slamming the door. I couldn't sleep though. I tiptoed around the room, looking at Steve's bookshelf. He had a rather strange taste in books, lots of Anne Rule and true crime there. I saw dozens of books about Ted Bundy, John Wayne Gacy, Richard Chase, Herbert Mullen, Jeffrey Dahmer, and Richard Ramirez among the collection. At the end, a large, black binder stood, unlabeled and worn-looking. It reminded me of the look of that leather-bound diary for a second, and my heart dropped. But logically, I knew this was just a coincidence. Yet still, I pulled out the binder, my curiosity piqued. What I found inside filled me with dread and horror. Countless news clippings covered the length of it. The first clipping was from nearly 20 years earlier, about a woman who went missing in the Alaskan forest while hiking. A later one confirmed that her body was never found, and that her family was still hoping that she might turn up alive somewhere. A reward was offered for any information, it said. And every page after that was more of the same. Missing woman, murdered prostitute, missing man, no leads. I kept flipping through until I found clippings about Will Lenning's act of unaliving himself and the sudden disappearance of his wife. On the article about the unaliving, Steve had used red marker to scrawl, "haha," next to it. I heard the click of a gun being cocked from behind me. I froze as Steve's voice traveled across the room like a whisper. "How do you like my work, friend?" he asked, his tone jovial and mocking. I still held the binder of horrors tightly in my hands as I stared open-mouthed at this man I thought I knew. "It's you. What, you killed Will Lenning and his wife? And a lot of other women, apparently." Everything felt unreal, as if I were stuck in a dream. Steve's grin spread across his face, but his blue eyes stayed cold and dead. "Yes, well, she was cheating on him with me anyway. Just another whore, you know. They always get what's coming to them in the end," he hissed with hatred oozing from his voice. "It's too bad, really. I just killed another slut tonight. I was planning on saving you for later. The urge isn't too bad yet right now, after all. It comes in cycles, you see. It comes in waves." I saw a glimmer of pale, naked flesh writhing behind Steve. With jerky movements, the twisted man came up behind him. I said nothing, just watching with wide-eyed horror and amazement. "You need help, man," I whispered. Steve laughed. "Help? The only help they give people like me is a needle in the arm. You know that. That's why it's important to always cover your tracks." The twisted man ran a long, broken finger across Steve's neck. Steve gave a strangled cry and jumped. He spun around, screaming. I glanced over at my shotgun next to the couch. I jumped for it as Steve turned back to me, firing his pistol twice. The first bullet soared high above me, raining wood splinters down on my head, but the second ripped into my leg. A cold, burning pain ran like fire up my shin. I screamed in agony and battle fury as I gripped the shotgun, spinning and firing. Steve's head exploded as the slug ripped through his brain. His forehead collapsed like a smashed melon as bone splinters and blood sprayed the wall behind him. The twisted man stood there, hunched over, grinning up at me. I felt warm blood gushing from my leg as I stared back at him, breathing hard. I wondered if I was dying. You weren't after me at all, were you?" I asked. "You were after Steve." But the twisted man said nothing. After a long moment, he slinked back into the shadows of the bedroom and disappeared. As night crawled its way toward morning, I thought back to the words the twisted man had spoken through the TV, suddenly understanding everything. He is a killer, the shadow of death. Many have fallen. Many lie buried across this forest. You will be next. He is watching you. He hadn't been trying to hurt me at all. He had been trying to warn me. He had probably tried to warn Will Lenning and his wife too. I wrapped my leg in gauze, gritting my teeth. The wound looked puckered and deep, but I could still move my foot, and the bullet had gone clean through the flesh. I poured alcohol on it, screaming in pain as it burned its way through my skin. After rummaging through Steve's bathroom, I found some prescription painkillers and swallowed a handful of them with a beer. I knew I would need the opiate high to get through the pain of riding into town with a mutilated leg. As the sun finally rose, I made my way outside the blood-stained floors of the cabin to my snowmobile. Before I left, I glanced back at that horrid place, the scene of so much torment and death. In the open doorway, the twisted man stood, his back hunched, his rotted lips grinning at me. His hand lifted up into the air with jerky movements and waved. I waved back as I started the engine and headed into town. We used to flip houses a lot. We had this one specific house we were working on, about 2,500 square feet, absolutely stunning home. My son would get very upset when we had to go work on it, which was strange because he was 15 or old at the time. One day I was going to paint and asked him if he was going that day. He asked me if he had to, which I decided I could manage without him that day. I arrived at the house and began working. About an hour or so into painting the finished basement, I seen something out of the corner of my eye. I assumed it was my husband, as it was about the right size, and was wearing a flannel and jeans. I didn't recognize the shirt, but really didn't think much of it. I asked him what's up, and no answer. When I turned to look at him, he was gone. I literally went upstairs and searched the entire house for my husband, also looked outside to see if his truck was there. It wasn't. When my husband showed up a little while later, I told him about it. He confirmed it wasn't him. A few weeks later, hubby was alone in the house laying hardwood flooring. He said he heard something dragging across the floor. He looked for the source and didn't see anything. He left and refused to return alone. Sold the house, and the new owners moved out a few months later. This happened about 6 weeks, maybe 2 months ago. Creepiest ass that's ever personally happened to me. Background: I was estranged from my mom for about 13 years before she passed away 3 years ago. She would be turning 67 tomorrow. After that, my younger brother and I reconnected. She wrote me out of the will and left the estate to him. That's okay too. He was the one that handled her crazy for a lot of years. So my brother was an awesome guy, caring and thoughtful. Sadly, he took his own life almost a year ago. He was my only sibling through mom. After my brother's memorial, we are sifting through some belongings, and his girlfriend comes around the corner holding an enormous ornate urn. She awkwardly asked if I want Mom. What? That hadn't occurred to me. Mom had been cremated and my brother had her ashes. Now my brother is gone. I guess Mom's coming with me. I put a seatbelt on the urn and I proceeded to drive 12 hours back home. My mom and I were estranged for a reason. She would give her coat to a stranger. She would welcome people into her home and make sure they were fed. She was wonderful at times, but she could also be downright malicious. She used to commit insurance fraud and file frivolous lawsuits. Just all kinds of shady things to make a buck. When I stood up to her and refused to be a part of the shadiness any longer, she changed the locks. We were done. So the urn has been in my house for about 10 months, and there have been a few truly bizarre, but not outrightly paranormal things happen. My husband and I both lost our jobs. A glass cracked all on its own. Small items disappearing all the time. Our husky whining and staring at a corner. Doors upstairs sometimes open or shut up their own accord, and they didn't used to do that. But the house is 50 years old and drafty, so who knows? Any one thing could be explained away, but they all started piling up. It was getting super creepy, so I called my cousin, and we burned some sage just the same as our grandmother taught us. We talked to Mom and told her that if she wants to stay, she needs to be kind. It has died down a lot since then. I do keep feeling like I see someone out of the corner of my eye. Nothing malicious per se, but just as if you have someone in the room minding their own business. I'm okay with that, but it does make me jump sometimes. Both she and my grandmother, back in happier times, would say that they would look out for us and make themselves known if they could. So sometimes if I'm alone, I'll talk to Mom. That brings us up to the recent thing that still gives me the creeps. One night, she woke me. I swear to God, she woke me up. I had been asleep on my stomach and was facing toward my husband, who was fast asleep. There's plenty of space between my side of the bed and the wall, and the bathroom is that way as well. I heard her say my name clear as day. Full volume. I know for certain that that was my dead mother, and I froze. It occurred to me that I had forgotten her voice. That was the first time I had really heard it in. At this point, 15 to 16 years. I started to cry, right then, still frozen in place. I was so afraid of turning around, and also felt such guilt about not remembering what she sounded like. What kind of a F can't remember their mother's voice? I had that non-malicious sense of something being in the room with me. I was creeped out enough about the whole thing that I didn't want to be woken that way again, and I was afraid to turn around and see what might be there in the dimly lit room. I said, "Hi Mom, I heard you." I laid there for a long time, not budging, until I eventually fell asleep. I can't forget that moment, and I think of it often when I go to bed. I really think she was just trying to make her presence known. So long as it's in a positive way, I don't mind that as much, but it's still 8 shades of creepy, especially at night. It has me second-guessing dark hallways in my own home. One night when I was 12 or 13, my parents were over at the neighbor's house, and I was home alone playing video games in the living room. I was laying on the couch with my hands over my head, using a wireless controller. The space behind my head and under my hands was where my Great Pyrenees dog would typically lay. A dog on my game started barking, and I heard my dog huff behind me. I started barking and laughing and trying to get a rise out of my dog. He started rustling around and huffing, and then he did something he had never done before. He started growling at me and snapped at my hands. I remember feeling his hot breath and spit. I immediately sat up and whipped around to look at him. No dog. He was with my parents at the neighbor's house. This experience helped shape my open-mindedness for the future. I was probably 9-10, home alone, although my grandparents lived next door. I swiveled around on the computer chair to watch the TV in between playing on the computer, probably waiting for dial-up load times or something. For some reason, as I swiveled around, my eyes locked on a candle on the shelf, Yankee candle type, big, heavy, not lit at the end of the TV entertainment center, only for a few seconds, but long enough to remember that it happened. I focused to the TV and didn't think anything more of it. I spun back to the computer and began to focus on my game. I heard two bangs. The first one was on the floor, and the second was at the wall by my computer desk. I immediately looked back at the candle, which was no longer on the shelf. I knew I'd find the candle at the wall under the desk, and I was correct. I put it back, called my mom, and asked her if she could help explain what happened. I went away from the situation without answers, but I gained a huge sense of, we know nothing of this dimension. This happened to me when I was around 10 years old. I never really told anybody apart from my best friends. I grew up in Scotland on a farm with my dad. After I turned 6, my dad started to develop arthritis in old age. He couldn't look after the animals, so I had to help out until we could sell them. Feeding them act. I was a bit of a tomboy in some ways. I didn't mind bugs, dirt and mud, the dark act. I didn't get scared easily. I was the kid trying to scare people most of the time for fun. One day my dad left me in charge of our land, whilst he went to get his back checked since it had been getting worse. You're probably thinking he didn't care about me or anything, so before you judge, he has, and always will care about me. He said that I should stay inside and draw, do something creative. I was brought up speaking English. I never really understood why, still don't to be honest, so I couldn't really talk to any of the adults. Some of my friends spoke English. I just pretended to know what they meant if they did speak Scottish, since I had an accent. People believed me. I just sat inside all day and drew pictures and did puzzles. It started raining and thundering. I jumped out of my skin every time I heard thunder. A while after the rain started, I heard a cow wandering around. We had 5 cows, 10 pigs and 3 sheep. I put on my raincoat and looked outside for her. The gate and the doors to the shed where they slept had blown open. I eventually tempted her back to the shed and calmed down the rest of the cows. There was one cow that was a bit smaller than the rest. She didn't have a name since she was so young, only born a few days ago. She normally stayed with the rest of the cows and stayed warm. I could see her huddled up in the corner, so I went to see if she was okay. The rest of the cows didn't even notice and care about her for some reason, so it was safer than normal to do so. When I was close enough to get a good look at her, I could tell something was wrong. Normally she would jump and run up to me and lick my hand like a pet cat or something. She just stayed still, huddled up and shivering. When I was sitting next to her, I put my hand on the back of her neck and patted her to reassure her that she was okay, and that the thunder couldn't hurt her. She bent her neck around and looked at me. She didn't blink and her eyes didn't move. She just stared at me. She jumped up, pushed me out the way and ran out of the open door. The gate was locked, so I thought she would run back inside when she realized it was raining. I ran after her but couldn't see her. I walked around the sides of the fence to see if there was a way she could get out. I was about to give up when I heard a rustle in the bushes on the other side of the fence. Spot? I nicknamed her that because she was just plain white with one black spot around her left eye. "You there, girl?" I asked. I leant over the wooden post and looked around with the torch. After a while, a small head poked out from over the bush and looked at me. It was so dark I couldn't see, so I pointed the torch at it. It was still dark. It wasn't Spot. I didn't know what it was. It looked like a black ball with black hair stuck on the top. "Hello?" I asked it, rather quietly. Grumble, grumble. The thing in the bushes shook and jumped out. It had 2 skinny and bone-like legs, about a foot in height, no arms or face at all. I stared at it and tried to figure out what it was. It growled at me and started to run towards me. I didn't realize how far away it was because of the rain. It was nearly as big as I was. I ran home, slammed the door, and just sat on the sofa crying. My dad got home and I went to bed. I didn't tell him about what had happened with the animals or what happened by the fence, because he didn't need any more stress. I woke up, washed, got dressed, and walked downstairs. My dad walked in through the front door with a sad look on his face. He had rain dripping off of his hair and his shoulders. "What's wrong, Dad?" I asked, plodding over to hug him. "It's nothing, just go back to your breakfast. I'll tell you later, Rose," he said, nudging me over to the table. After breakfast, my dad went up to have a nap, and I went out to put some food in the troughs for the cows. The gate was unlocked, but not open. I ignored it and carried on. I had my torch in my pocket, so that if that thing showed up again, I could whack it with it, then run off screaming like bloody murder. I pushed open the huge doors and dragged the food bucket behind me. Grumble, munch, grumble at first. It sounded like a cat trying to meow and eat at the same time. Then it started to sound like snarling. I looked around and I could see the black ball off fur hunched over in the corner. I could see one of the bigger cows underneath it covered in blood. It didn't know I was there until I screamed, dropped the food and ran. It snarled and chased after me. I got to the gate and I couldn't hear the footsteps anymore. I turned around and swung my torch around in self-defense. I sighed and wiped the tears off my face. I turned around and it was there, its face nearly touching mine. It was breathing heavily and staring, I think, at me. Its fur and hair was soaked in blood, and so was what was meant to be its face. I screamed and ran to the door of our cottage. "Dad, Dad." I shouted over and over again until he woke up. I heard the thing's footsteps getting louder and louder as it ran up the gravel pathway. My dad opened the door and the footsteps stopped. I looked up at him and burst into tears. He picked me up and hugged me. He put me back down on my feet and patted me on the head. "What's wrong, princess?" he asked me in a reassuring voice. I told him what happened, and he told me that he was sad because one of the older cows died of old age. He called some people, and they would have picked up the body without me knowing since it would upset me. I looked in some books and couldn't find any animal that looked even similar to what I saw. I was wondering if anybody else has experienced anything like this, and if they found an explanation for it. So I'm just gonna get straight to it because I'm so scared out of my mind. I don't know what to do. I'm blind and I live alone. I have no friends because I'm an introvert. I never ever leave the house. I have my groceries delivered, but I don't cook much. I usually just order takeout. I don't work because of my disability, so I spend every day of my life pretty much reading stories on Reddit. I have this really cool software that reads everything to me, or listening to music or television. Lately, however, strange things have been happening in my home. Being a person without sight, you pretty much have to rely on your other senses more. Smell, touch, hearing, etc. Everything in my home is always in the exact same place. I know my house like the back of my hand. Last week is when it all started. I woke up around 9 a.m. and started my daily routine. Use the bathroom, take a shower, brush my teeth. Thing is, when I went for my toothbrush, it wasn't sitting in the charging base electric toothbrush like it usually is. This immediately struck me as odd. I distinctly remembered placing it there the night before, and if it had fallen, I would have heard it. I checked all over for it, but couldn't find it anywhere. I ended up flossing and rinsing with mouthwash for the time being, puzzled and unnerved about the situation. Later that night, when I went to brush my teeth before bed, I had actually forgotten at this point about the missing toothbrush. I reached for the toothbrush, and as soon as my hand touched it, I remembered that it wasn't supposed to be there. My heart skipped a beat because I knew that this morning it was not there. I knew it. I kinda just blew it off after a while, mostly for my own peace of mind. It had to have been there all along, right? Anyway, I went to bed, not able to completely shake the paranoia creeping into my psyche. The following day, everything seemed normal until around 3 p.m. I was sitting at my computer with my headphones on listening to some music when all of a sudden I felt warm breath on the back of my neck. Not only that, but I got a whiff of a bad odor in my nose. I quickly snatched the phones from my ears and spun around in my chair, wildly swinging my hands in the area. The presence had seemed to be just moments before. There was nothing there, but I swear I heard a chuckle on the other side of the room. Was I imagining this? Am I going crazy? Am I reading too many stories on NaSleep, and they're finally getting to me? I'm not a believer in the supernatural, but I still enjoy a good story about it every now and again. Later that night I was sleeping and was startled awake. You know that feeling when you wake up suddenly, but you don't really know why? You just know that something startled you awake. It was one of those moments. I sat up in bed and just listened intently, but it was eerily quiet. Almost too quiet, actually. But what I did notice was the same smell from earlier, this time accompanied by another smell that I can't really explain. It just wasn't right. I swear I felt a presence. It was as if someone had their face only inches away from mine, just looking at me, taunting me. I quickly raised my hand and swiped it through the air in front of me, but there was nothing there. Then, I could swear I heard the metallic click of my bedroom door closing. I always sleep with my bedroom door closed. Needless to say, I didn't get much sleep that night. I know some of you are thinking that by this point I should have called the police, but I honestly thought maybe it was all just my imagination getting the best of me. I didn't want to look like some paranoid blind chick, you know? But something happened last night that changed all that. Around 6 p.m., my doorbell rang. This struck me as strange because no one ever visits me unannounced. Well, no one ever visits me, period, unless it's someone coming to deliver something. I slowly got up from my couch and made my way to the door, banging my knee on the coffee table that appeared to be about 5 or 6 more inches to the left than it normally is. "Who's there?" I asked, sounding more sheepish than I meant to. An enthusiastic and friendly male voice answered from the other side of the door. "Mario's Takeout, ma'am. I'm delivering the food you ordered." Mario's Takeout. I've never ordered from Mario's Takeout. I'm sorry, but I didn't order any takeout, sir. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but I'm pretty sure I have the correct address." He stated my address and home phone number, took the call myself. It was a male voice, maybe your husband. I instantly got goosebumps. Someone had placed a call from my residence and ordered takeout from a place I've never even heard of. Oh, my husband must have forgotten he ordered the food and he just stepped out. I lied. "I'm really sorry, but I don't have the money to pay you for it." "That's fine, ma'am. I understand. Just know that I'm gonna have to make a note of this, and in the future you'll have to pay with a credit card over the phone to avoid another situation like this." "That's fine, and again I'm so sorry about this," I said. "Not a problem. You have a good night." And with that, he left. I didn't hesitate to go straight to the phone to call the police. The only problem was, the phone wasn't in its cradle. Now I know I'm not imagining things. I hadn't used my phone for days, and I knew that I had placed it back in the cradle the last time I used it. That happened last night, and I still haven't found my phone. Things are out of place all around my home, and my toothbrush is missing again. At one point last night, I turned over on my side in bed, and immediately noticed that same odor and warm breath from before. I froze in fear, and I swear to you, I felt a weight slowly lift from the other side of the bed. Part 2. So, let me begin by answering a few questions and concerns I read in the comments section for my first post. As far as how I was able to write and type my story, I use an awesome software program called Dolphin Guide, which makes using my computer super easy and foolproof. I would recommend it for anyone who is vision impaired. Next, I do not own a cell phone, nor do I have Facebook or any other social media account, because, as I stated before, I don't have any friends. As I said, I never leave the house, so a cell phone is just not necessary. I developed a phobia of going out in public shortly after I suddenly lost my vision 17 years ago, when I was 12. I was dragged by my mom from specialist to specialist until I was 15 to try and get answers for my sudden vision impairment, but we never got any. After that, I never left the house again. I do have neighbors, but they're few and far between. My closest neighbor is approximately, this is a guess, 500 feet away, and our houses are separated by a large mass of trees, so it would be pretty difficult for me to make it over there. Even if they were close by, the only neighbor that my mom and I were acquainted with was Miss Kimchitis, whom would come over and check on me from time to time after my mom passed 5 years ago. But she moved about 2 years ago with her daughter and her family to California when her health began to fail her. I didn't even go to my own mom's funeral because after she died her family had her transported back to Seattle, where she's originally from, for her final resting place. I still haven't gotten over that. As far as getting a dog, I'm very allergic to pet dander. When I was 9, my mom finally gave in to my constant and persistent pleas to get a dog. We had Scout for 3 days before we realized he was making me sick. I was heartbroken when we had to return him to the shelter. So, now that that's out of the way, let me catch you guys up on what has happened over the past couple of days. I searched and searched for my phone until I remembered the page button on the base that makes the handset beep and give you a general idea as to where it's located. I pressed the page button and was relieved when I heard the beeping coming from the kitchen. I made my way into the kitchen and fumbled around, still not able to locate it, although I heard the beeping get louder and louder. I knew I was getting close. Then, the beeping stopped after a minute or so. Frustrated and still on edge, I made my way back over to the base and pressed the page button again. This time, the beeping was coming from an entirely different direction. It was coming from my bedroom. I stood there frozen for what seemed like 10 minutes, although I'm pretty sure it wasn't that long, confused. Then I heard it. Laughter. Not a quiet chuckle or a muffled giggle. Full-blown laughter. My heart sank. Someone was taunting me, playing a messed-up game of cat and mouse. Who's there? I asked in a soft, shaky voice. The laughter continued, got louder even. Please, who's there? What do you want, please? I began sobbing at this point. You have no idea how it feels to know that someone is invading your space, and there's nothing you can do because you can't even see where or who they are. If they're standing right in front of you, just watching, stalking. It got eerily quiet, but I could feel a presence slowly approaching. Suddenly, I could smell the bad odor from before, and I could feel the warm breath on my face. I visibly shuddered. Don't worry, I'm not here to hurt you. Came a soft and low, yet masculine voice. I nearly jumped out of my skin when I finally heard the intruder speak. Now, I knew for sure I wasn't alone. How long had he been there, stalking me? Why are you here? I asked in a shaky whisper. I'm here to protect you. Then I felt his cold, rough hand on my wet cheek. He slowly caressed it. I gasped and pulled away. Protect me from what? I asked. You're too beautiful and vulnerable to be alone. In your condition. I love you. I don't want to see you harmed. At this point, I knew I was dealing with someone with serious mental issues. I also began to realize that his voice, although it sounded as if he were trying to disguise it, sounded vaguely familiar. I just couldn't put my finger on it. It had to be one of my delivery guys, which would narrow it down quite a bit. Please, I don't need protection, I said feebly. He scoffed. You don't need protection. You live here alone and you're blind. He suddenly sounded angry. You don't even have an alarm system. Do you know how easy it was for me to get in here? You're lucky it was me and not some psycho nut job, he began to yell. I almost laughed at his last statement if I weren't so afraid. I wanted to say, apparently I need protection from the psycho nut job that's standing in my home uninvited. His voice became calm again. I've been here watching over you for a while now, 27 days to be exact. I was shocked to hear this. I only started noticing signs about a week ago. You're such a sound sleeper. I've slept beside you every night and you didn't have a clue. You snore a little too. He snorted, chuckled. Don't be embarrassed. It's cute. He began to stroke my cheek again. Then he took my hand. Come on, let's sit, talk. He led me over to the couch and we sat. I sat stiff as a board, still sobbing and shaking. He placed his hand on my knee, his attempt at putting me at ease. It made me tense up even more. The only things running through my head were possible ways to escape this maniac. My disability was going to make that very difficult. I liked the little story you wrote about me to your cyber friends. It was very intriguing. It made me feel special. And the way you said the words, and they just came up on the screen, like magic. He chuckled. What are you going to do to me? I finally asked. I told you I'm only here to protect you. You know, about a month ago, just before I broke in, I probably saved your life. What? I asked, confused. Well, I had been sitting outside your house for about a week at that point. After I made my first delivery to you, I became, I guess the best word to use would be, smitten. Over you. You were so beautiful, yet so vulnerable. I felt like it was my mission to protect you. I knew it. I knew it was one of the delivery guys. At this point, I believed I knew which one, but I wasn't absolutely sure. I just listened. He continued. So, I was sitting in front of your house in my car, and I noticed some movement. I saw someone come from the trees and go to the back of your house. I got out of my car and quietly made my way around back, where I noticed a person dressed in all black trying to break into your window. I yelled hey, and scared the crap out of him. He laughed as he recalled how frightened the would-be intruder had become. As he told the story, I remembered that very night. I thought I had heard someone tampering with my window, but wasn't sure. I listened intently, then I didn't hear it anymore, so I figured it was just my imagination. Hearing his story gave me goosebumps. He ran so fast he tripped a couple of times and fell. I just stood there laughing. Some punk neighborhood teen probably. Anyway, that's when I realized you needed protection at all times, so I've been here ever since, protecting you. But who are you? I asked. Can you at least tell me your name? I'm Xander. As soon as he said his name, I got a chill down my spine. I remembered him. He was the delivery guy from the company that delivers my groceries once a week. He only delivered to me twice, but I remembered him giving me an uneasy feeling the second time he made a delivery. He was overly nice and offered to put my groceries away for me. I remembered him telling me how attractive I was, and that I should have a man around the house, and that I shouldn't be living here alone. He hung around much longer than he should have before I finally told him that I had company coming soon, a lie of course, to get rid of him. I called the company later in the week and asked if they could send the regular delivery guy from now on, and when they asked me if there was a problem with Xander, which is how I got his name, I simply told them that I just liked familiarity because of my impairment, and they understood. I really didn't want to get him into trouble. I just assumed he had good intentions, but just expressed them in the wrong way. I was really kicking myself for not thinking of him before, but I had honestly forgotten about that incident until he said his name. You remember me, don't you? He asked. I just nodded. I knew you would. He began to stroke my hair. I cringed. The touch of him repulsed me. I could smell his putrid breath, and I wanted to throw up. I was in a helpless position. What was I supposed to do? How was I supposed to get away from this stalker who was taking advantage of my disability? Then I had a plan. Please bear with me, guys. I've been through a lot, and this post is already pretty long. I will give you all the details on how I got rid of that creepy bastard as soon as I can update again. Right now I'm exhausted and I need some rest. Bye for now. Thank you all for your concern and great advice. Final part. Okay, so I'm just going to start from where I left off. I apologize for not getting you all caught up yesterday, but I just needed more rest than I thought. As I sat there on the couch with this sick stranger, touching me and stroking me as if we were intimate acquaintances, I came up with a plan. I had to suck it up and make him think that what he was doing was okay, that I felt the same way about him as he did me. I had to gain his trust so that he could become the vulnerable one, and I could go through with my plan. I also knew that if I didn't execute it just right, it could mean trouble for me. I could anger him, especially now that I've seen that he has a temper, and he could hurt me or worse. You're right. I do need a man in the house. I began trying to sound as convincing as possible. I've never really had a boyfriend besides Billy Eastrike when I was 10. But why? You're so beautiful, he said as he wiped more tears from my face. No, I'm not. I'm blind. No one would want me. I played the pity card. Don't you say that, he snapped, causing me to jump. He noticed and immediately calmed down and began to stroke my hair again. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have yelled. I just don't like to hear you say things like that about yourself. I wish you could see how beautiful you are. I almost, just for a split second, felt flattered by him. Then I thought about how he broke into my home and has been playing this sick game of hide and seek with me for the past month. He claims to love me and want to take care of me, yet he hides my phone and taunts me with his horrible breath just inches away from me, laughing and enjoying the fact that I can't see him and how vulnerable and helpless I am. I had to go through with my plan. What do you look like? I asked him. Oh, I'm a handsome devil. He laughed at himself, amused. I managed to smile, hoping that it looked sincere. I thought so. I lied. Do you mind if I see for myself? I could tell I confused him with this question because he was quiet. I explained. See, when you're blind you learn to see with your hands. Touch is one of my stronger senses. All I have to do is I paused and slowly placed my hands on either side of his face, feel your features, and it'll give me a good idea of what you look like. Yeah, I've seen that before on TV, but I didn't know it really worked, he said, sounding like a naive little boy. I giggled, still playing the part. My heart began to race as I prepared to make my life or death move. Yeah, it really works. Here, I'll show you. He relaxed and allowed me to softly run my hands over his face, caressing every feature, every curve. I honestly can't tell you what he looked like because that wasn't my real motive. I could care less. I just knew that I had to get away from this psycho. I slowly moved my fingers back to the sides of his face and began to move my thumbs over his closed eyes. My adrenaline was pumping at this point, and it felt like my heart was going to jump right out of my chest onto my lap. I knew this was my only chance, and I knew I had to take it now. I slowly counted to 3 in my head. 1, 2, 3. The next thing I heard was the agonizing scream coming from Xander as I found the bones beneath his eyes with my thumbs and pressed them into his sockets between the bone and his eyeballs with all the strength I could gather. This caught him off guard, and I was able to stand up and crouch over him as he fell back onto the couch, and I continued to press deep into his sockets. I felt his eyeballs pop under my thumbs, which made me feel the urge to throw up, and I swear I never heard such a horrifying scream in my life. I knew that I had done some serious damage, but I wasn't sure it was enough. I had to make a run for it. I headed towards my front door, but I tripped over something in the floor. I went down and was afraid that Xander would grab me at that point, but he was still screaming in the background. "You bitch, what did you do to me? I can't see." At that point he had begun to wail. My eyes. Hearing that he couldn't see gave me the courage to get back up and make a run for it. I finally got to the front door and flung it open. A feeling of anxiety came over me when I realized that I was about to step outside for the first time in over 14 years. I had no idea where I was going or even how to get there, but I knew that I had to get away from this maniac. I took a deep breath and ran as fast as I could as I held my hands out in front of me. I went tumbling down the steps and scraped my knees and hands, but the adrenaline pumping through my body didn't allow me to feel the effects of it. I jumped back up and kept going, still hearing screaming in my ears. I soon realized that the screaming I now heard was my own. I screamed at the top of my lungs. I didn't know if anyone would hear me, but I prayed that someone would. I had no idea if Xander had gotten himself together and was coming after me. I knew that if I went straight ahead through the front yard, I would come to the road. Once I got to the road, I planned to follow along the side until someone would see me and come to my rescue. Before I could reach the road, however, I passed out. The next thing I remember is waking up in a cold room in an unfamiliar bed. I gasped. "Where am I? Oh God, where am I?" Suddenly, I felt a hand on mine. I screamed. "Please, calm down. You're safe, Kelly," said a soft woman's voice. Hearing her voice and her words made me feel slightly at ease. "Where am I? What happened?" I asked, beginning to cry. "You're in the hospital. You're fine. You've been through a lot. Just relax." I assumed she was a nurse. I realized at that moment that I was safe and away from Xander. I breathed a sigh of relief. My plan had worked. I was curious, though. I wanted to know what happened to Xander. I later found out exactly what happened after I passed out. One of my neighbors was passing by when she spotted me on the ground next to the road. She stopped to check on me and called 911 when she heard the screams coming from inside my house. The paramedics and police arrived and got to work. They found Xander inside, sprawled out on the floor, his face a bloody mess. He was still screaming and crying when they put him into the ambulance. Apparently, he confessed to everything. He told them how he had been stalking me in my own home for the past month. He told them how he was infatuated with me and that he only wanted to protect me. He said that he quit his job after they informed him that I had requested my old delivery person, and that's when he began sitting outside my residence watching my house. They say that he is a very disturbed individual, and he will probably spend the rest of his life in an institution because he needs serious help. The last thing they told me was what gave me the most satisfaction. Xander lost both of his eyes and is now completely and totally blind. How's that for karma? Oh, and by the way, Officer Phillips has volunteered to patrol my neighborhood and check up on me every now and then. He's also going to help me find a seeing eye dog that is hypoallergenic that I may be able to tolerate. We'll see how that goes. He really is going out of his way to help me and make me feel safe, and he also told me that I'm beautiful. About 6 or 7 years ago, my brother and I were home alone while our parents were on a vacation together. It's about 2 in the morning at this point, and we had been getting bored of watching TV on the couch and went to my brother's room to play some PS3 in his bedroom. Our long hallway first started with my brother's bedroom and the main bathroom, my room and my parents' rooms being the very back of the house. The light switch to the hallway was right next to the entrance of my brother's doorway. As my brother went to flip on the hallway light, we witnessed a flash of light almost like a camera flash in his closet, and then suddenly the bedroom closet door that was slightly ajar slowly shut right in front of us. We were both still trying to process what just happened when suddenly in our parents' room, we could hear someone open their closet door and begin rummaging through the clothes and hangers. My brother immediately told me to call the police as our first thought is that someone was possibly breaking into the house. So I grabbed the phone while my brother went to check our parents' bedroom. There was nobody in the room and nothing had been disturbed. But the clothes and hangers were still slightly swinging like someone had just looked through them. We didn't end up calling the police, but had a next door neighbor come over and check through the house with us. Definitely one of the top creepiest things that happened in our home growing up. Still gives us the chills when we bring it up. Last year, there was a double murder across the hall from me in my apartment building. We heard everything. Ever since then, multiple tenants have come and gone out of the apartment, but things have been happening in my apartment too. While my husband was home, a Bible flew across the room from our bookshelf. The thing that was the scariest was when I was home alone, sleeping early in the morning because he was at work. I heard vicious banging on my bedroom window, so loud it woke me as well as my dog up. I'm on the second floor. I get so many weird vibes every time I walk by the apartment, and up until last week, there was still a huge blood stain in the hallway carpet. My basement as a kid was an L shape, with the stairs at one end, a rec room as the short end of the L, and the laundry, playroom, bathroom, and a small storage room making up the long end. I was in the small storage room at the end of the L using the phone there. Not sure why I was using the phone there, but I had a clear view straight into the rec room doorway, and wasn't really paying attention to anything but the phone call when I caught a glimpse of someone walking from the stairs side of the rec room to the other. My mom and sister had left early for the cottage, and I stuck around to wait for my dad to get home from work, and we were going to leave when he did. So I obviously assumed it was my dad home from work. This person I saw for a fraction of a second. Then a moment later, they went back towards the stairs. Still didn't think anything of it. Finished the phone call, went to leave the basement, and paused for a moment in the rec room. I noticed that the N64 was absent from the TV stand. So then I thought it must have been my sister coming back to grab the N64 for the cottage. Although if she wanted it, she could have just called me and had me bring it. So I called her and asked if she had taken the system with her. She hadn't. Her and Mom were well on the way to the cottage an hour away. I went upstairs. Dad was in the living room. He had come home a few minutes ago. I hadn't heard him. He didn't have the N64. The front door was locked, as it always was, no matter who was home or where they were in the house. That was just how it always was at our house. Dad hadn't heard anyone use the front door, and even if the back door had been unlocked, it's in the living room next to the TV Dad was watching. So, some shadowy figure entered my locked house, took my N64, cables, controllers, most of the games, and then left, right in front of me. If I had just gotten up and walked to the rec room, what would I have interrupted? How did they possibly come and go? Until I got to the cottage, I thought my sister was messing with me, but she really didn't have it. My parents couldn't explain it. We bought a new N64 when we got home from the cottage. I still have it all these years later, and somehow the events of that day have never been followed up on since. To clarify, even if the front door had been unlocked for once, someone would have had to deliberately walk up our driveway and under the carport past a minivan that meant someone was home to even test if the door was locked. Then right inside the door were the stairs up to the living room and down to the basement. So they would have taken a gamble on the basement having anything valuable in it, past numerous other things that might have been valuable, to specifically disassemble an entire N64 setup from a TV you had to fight to get behind for the hookups. Even if you were familiar with it, in record time no less, while probably hearing me on the phone 2 rooms away, then brazenly walked out. It just doesn't make sense, and I've spent like 25 years thinking about it. One night I was passed out in bed, and all of a sudden I am awoken by my dog standing on me. It takes me a moment to realize he is growling deeply. I am like, WTF, get off me. But he won't. He has me pinned down on the bed as he growls at something across the room. It's dark, so I can't see anything. At this point, I am terrified, thinking someone or something is across the room from me in the dark. I keep trying to reach for the light switch behind me, but can't because my dog has me pinned. I finally, after what felt like forever, push my dog off me, jump up and flip on the switch, and nothing. It all stopped. My dog stopped growling, and the feeling of uneasy went away. I have no idea what it was, but to this day I have that memory engraved in my brain. I can still remember the fear I felt. A few years ago, I lived in a townhome. I shared a wall with a neighbor on one side, but I had no one on the other side. I couldn't hear my neighbor at all. In the entire time I lived there, I never heard anything at all that indicated another human lived only a wall away. That's important because weird stuff started happening in the home, not long after I moved in. Some was just standard weird, such as when I had recurring dreams about a man in the bedroom closet in my room. He'd hide behind the door, slowly open it, then creep across the room to try to get me, which would wake me up. That's standard in that it might be a dream, because the other stuff that happened was much worse. When my now wife moved in, she heard footsteps in the bedroom one night. Only the two of us were in the home and I was downstairs. When I came back up, she asked me why I had been walking around while she was trying to sleep. Since I hadn't, we turned on all the lights in the house and searched it for anyone else. Nothing. On another occasion, I had stored a coffee table on a high shelf in the bedroom closet, the same one as above. I was downstairs and heard the unmistakable sound of it falling off, a resounding boom. When I raced upstairs, it was still in place, as everything else in the room was too. My kids would stay with me about half the time, and they reported some weird things too. The weirdest one was when one of them, she was about 8 or 9 at the time, asked me who the bald man in the closet was. When I asked for clarification, she said that sometimes he would open the closet and smile at her, then close it again. That closet was full of junk with no standing space, so that's a big nope. But now for the freakiest thing of all. When I moved in, the first thing I did was to hang a picture one of my friends had drawn for me as a housewarming present. I put it on the landing at the bottom of the staircase, just at the point where the stairs turn, and there is a little banister there. This hung in that spot the entire 5 years I lived there, with the picture never moving, swaying, or anything else. Well, when it was time to move, we began hauling everything out in droves. I left the picture on the wall, intending for it to be the last thing I removed as a kind of poetic symmetry. On the last trip we made to the house to do a walkthrough, the picture had somehow flown off the wall and been driven over the little knob on the banister, impaling the entire frame, picture, glass, and all. I remember thinking, okay, that's just going to stay, and instead going upstairs to check for anything we missed. All the rooms were clear, so I started to the top of the stairs. I have never, ever in my life felt something so malicious, so present as I did behind me at the top of those stairs. I could feel something, I don't know what, just behind me, almost like it was breathing, just about to touch me, and it wanted to push me down the stairs. It was dark in the house since the power had already been shut off, so I didn't have a clear view of what was around me since this was early dusk, and the stairs had no window. Whatever it was seemed only to need the right opening to do it. I am not ashamed to say that I took the stairs in two and just left. I didn't walk the rest of the house. I just left. I don't know who lives there now. I don't care. I don't ever want to go back. Lived in a house built in 1990 for a while. I was a teen. Wasn't entirely home alone, but my mom and stepdad were in their bedroom, sleeping behind one of those old pocket doors. I was laying on the couch watching TV, and it was storming. Suddenly my cell phone died. It was on its last leg, and then the power went out. I was a little spooked, but stayed on the couch and tried to fall asleep. A few minutes went by, and I got this weird feeling that I was being watched. Look over into the office connected to the living room, and see a black figure on all fours staring at me. I could only see it each time lightning struck. It worked its way through the office and into the living room very slowly. It creeped into the dining room, climbed onto the table, jumped and vanished mid-jump. I have GAD, so I started having a severe panic attack. My mom finally walks out to the end of my panic attack and witnesses me literally passing out. When I awoke, she asked me what happened and I told her. She looked at me like I was an idiot. Fast forward 6 months and I'm living with my dad because I couldn't handle the constant paranormal activity in that house. I was getting ready for school at 6 a.m. and my mom calls me. I answer and the first thing she says is, "I saw it." She put the house on the market a week later. Heard loud noises from our cellar in the middle of the night. Our house is quite old and has a very spacious cellar with many rooms and an extra door that leads into the garden that's normally locked, but not this day. Went down to check for stray animals. Sometimes cats get down there during the day and make a mess at night, so it didn't think much of it at first. There weren't any cats to be found. Instead, I found the cellar garden door to be wide open and a dude strolling through the cellar rooms. As soon as he saw me and I spotted him, we both started running. He seemingly went outside the cellar while I sprinted back to the house and locked every door behind me. I was scared to death. Went back a few hours later during daybreak to check if anything was stolen, but nothing was missing. A few days later, it turned out to be the son of my neighbor who had a few drinks too much and mixed up our cellar with the one of his dad. Our houses have quite a similar layout. He thought me to be an intruder to their cellar. We had a good laugh afterwards, but boy was it intense. I wasn't actually home alone, but in the moment, it feels like someone couldn't reach you fast enough. I was in middle school, and it was the early hours about when I'd wake up. My bed was in the corner of my room, and I'd always keep my door closed at night. So when I was sleeping and I heard a shuffling sound, I slowly opened my eyes and first realized a soft light was coming into my room from my open door. Then I noticed a crouched figure horrifyingly at the end of my bed closest to the center of my room. Now, most people have seen a coat at night or some other object that startles us because of its dark shape, but this shape was moving. I only had my head held up waiting for something to happen, but strangely nothing did. It didn't eerily turn towards me, lurch at me, or fade away. It just stayed there struggling in a very humanoid way with something. Naturally, I wanted to turn on the lights ASAP, but the problem was my fan light string was directly above said thing. That meant moving right to the corner of my bed, directly in front of the thing, and hoping I could find the string in the dark without taking my eyes off it. I tried swiftly moving to the corner and grabbing the light switch, staring absolutely bug-eyed at this thing, and when the lights came on, the figure was my older brother. Half-dressed at the end of my bed, sitting on the floor, trying to shove his fat feet into my sneakers. I was confused and so was he. I asked, "Lank, what are you doing?" And he just said groggily, I don't know, sorry." He still looked half asleep and just got up and left. My brother had seizures before this, so he could get confused sometimes, but something like this had never happened. He was obviously trying to get ready for school since high school starts earlier than middle school, and I just happened to still be sleeping. Told my mom about it and kidded with him about it, but everything was fine. It all happened in less than 2 minutes, but the switch from peaceful sleep to heart thumping in your ears ready to fight or flight with a demon was jarring lol. It was just so surreal. When you see so many scary movies, you just think there's no way I can scream for help or make a break for it. You just have to lay there and accept it or get up and confront it.
Thanks for listening. Hope you already fallen asleep. See you tomorrow at the same time.